And please take your seats. Yep, we're going to do a quick run through. All right, town meeting members, we're going to start the evening by doing attendance to make sure everyone's clicker is working. So if you could pull your clickers out, we're going to get the vote ready, and when the green light turns on, that is when voting begins. The green light is on. If you hit green, it means you're here. Red, you shouldn't be hitting it because you are here. And yellow is if you want to let no one know that you are here. So hit the green button to tell everyone you are here and present, please. We'll keep it open for about 30 seconds. After you hit the button, you should see a Y and the box OK, which means that your vote is being registered. So, okay. Yep. All right, we're going to close the vote. Okay, come on over. See Mrs. Lannon. We're going to scroll through real quick to make sure everyone's is working. While we do that, members who are using Wi-Fi at this time inside the building, please use the Parkhurst Wi-Fi and give it a shot. They're doing a test program for us to see if we can get a better signal. There's no login required, so click Parkhurst, the network name. That's coming from the IT director for the district.
Change your name on the file, so I'll bring it to you, okay? Just give me a minute.
Okay, we're going to scroll real quick. Do you need to scroll through again? Can you scroll through again?
Yeah, we're just changing a name real quick. George, okay? And as I did mention,
okay.
As I did mention, the sign-up sheets that the staff is taking your legal signature, that's the attendance we will be using to keep track, because there's always a little bit of a lull. Somebody's in the restroom or what have you.
Or we have late arrivers. All right, so let's get going. So night 4 of the 2022 Spring Town Meeting will please come to order. Town meeting requires 100 members for a quorum, and having 125 in attendance, I see there is sufficient number of members present to permit us to open the meeting, and I do so declare. Welcome one and all. I'm Heather Von Mering, your town meeting moderator. To our town meeting members, welcome back for night 4, which will focus on the remaining articles of the agenda, starting with Article 18 to appropriate monies for a multi-purpose sports court at Mystic School, and then move onwards to Article 26 to appropriate funds for the Sandboard Carriage House renovations. Our goal, as noted at our last meeting, is to complete all of the business for Spring Town Meeting. In lieu of that information, as speakers are allowed 5 minutes, other than the proponent or sponsor of the articles, your fellow members would greatly appreciate it if you can reduce the length of your speeches or comments to 3 minutes so we can get through all the business and not stay to the wee hours of the morning. I also want to welcome again members of town staff, members of boards and committees, town consultants, and article presenters, as well as residents and other visitors who have all joined us tonight. Welcome one and all. The Department of Health has asked me to reiterate that the mask requirements are still in effect, and we ask that for the comfort of those around you, you please wear a mask unless you have a documented medical reason not to. If you have any concerns or questions regarding this mask mandate, please direct your comments and questions to Ms. Jennifer Murphy. I hope all of the mothers with us today here and also watching on WinCam had a nice Mother's Day yesterday, although it was a little bit chilly, I have to say. Since 1929, women have participated in voting as Winchester Town Meeting members. As we many times discuss the anniversary of the right for women to vote and participate in town meeting, it is important to note that on that day, 93 years ago, Winchester voted 34 women to town meeting. In that action, they also voted on that day to have representation by those who identify as mothers. To all the women among us in town meeting who identify as mothers, thank you for giving of yourself and your time to our local government, and not only representing yourself, but also other mothers of our community and your children, no matter their age or place in life, as you are always a mother. As a legislative body, we are at our best when we as a whole represent of the people, by the people, and for the people. Thank you for being you. We will continue our meeting tradition with the Pledge of Allegiance. For those who would like to option to join me, please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may please be seated. As I like to end my comments, we must bear in mind as we join together as a legislative body of Winchester, not only our personal interests, but those of our community and each other as a whole. As we deliberate, let us, each of us here tonight, maintain an open mind, an open heart, graciousness when we disagree, and a healthy sense of humor so that the business of this meeting will not be a source of division among us when our business here is finished. As noted, we will begin the business of the meeting commencing with Article 18, which is to appropriate money for a multi-purpose sports court at Mystic School. It is moved and seconded that the town appropriate $200,000 from free cash for the construction of a multi-purpose sports court at the Mystic School, including engineering services, construction, and all other costs incidental and related thereto. Requires a majority vote. The proponent is the Select Board. On their behalf is Mr. Michael Betancourt. This is on page 22 of your green booklet. Your spring annual town meeting articles, motions, and comments.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Town Meeting Article 18, sponsored by the Select Board, comes before you today to request an appropriation of $200,000 from free cash for the construction of a multi-purpose sports court at the Mystic School building for the Winchester Recreation Department programs, including Kids Connection, preschool, and the RAP after-school program. Hundreds of kids attend programs through the rec department every day, and the number is growing. The current play area for the kids is well beyond its useful life and unsafe for kids to play on, even with continued maintenance. The town has not made any substantial investment in the Mystic building since it made necessary repairs to the roof more than a decade ago. This court hasn't been updated. This court hasn't been updated in over 25 years, and it shows. Here's another close-up of the existing condition. The current blacktop area has faint lines for foursquare amongst sand, crumbling asphalt, and a broken basketball hoop that was donated and does not function, leaving only one hoop, which is also failing, for the kids in the program to play. Because the blacktop area is undesirable to use, the majority of the kids play on the small grass area, which has turned into sand and weeds because of overuse. This area was actually just hydro-seeded last year. Just around the corner at the front of the Mystic building, Kids Corner runs a parallel after-school program. The space is leased to the school department for a reduced rate, but at a higher cost to Winchester families. As you can see, the kids enjoy a multi-sport play space in top-notch condition. At this past fall town meeting, $25,000 was approved for the design and engineering of a multi-purpose sports court to replace the existing playground area that is well beyond its useful life. The court offers low maintenance and flexibility. Full court basketball, volleyball, badminton, shuffleboard, and street hockey, to name a few. There will be no lights or sound amplification as part of the project. Since fall town meeting, the town has worked with Huntress Associates on the design and engineering of the sports court. The design substantially incorporates the existing footprint of the blacktop and improves substantially on ADA accessibility. These drawings and schematics were presented to the Select Board and public in March at one of the regularly scheduled meetings and updated recently after meetings with the neighbors. The Recreation Department was disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic as it lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in child care revenue. It needed to balance its budget. It was necessary for the town to increase its operating subsidy to $400,000 just to stay afloat. This year, the town subsidized the department with nearly $300,000 in free cash. Because the Recreation Department is an enterprise fund. Hey Matt, how do I get this to go down? To go down in the scroll down? It just, excuse me. I just want to scroll down to my notes is what I want to do. You see what I'm saying? This area here.
Yeah, but I can't scroll that down.
Oh, I can't.
Can you get the mouse to it?
There we go.
Sorry.
Thank you for the technical expertise. That was a lot simpler than I made it. Because the Recreation Department is an enterprise fund, much like our Water and Sewer Department, it needs to generate revenue to fund its operating costs like salaries and health care. Improving our activities and facilities is a way for us to bring value to the Recreation Department, attract more kids to the programs, and move on. Nick Cacioppi, our Recreation Director, is focused on making the department self-sustaining. To that end, he and his team have developed and implemented more than 20 new programs at the Rec Center in the past year alone, including preschool gymnastics, ping pong, 3D printing, and junior basketball, to name a few. The Select Board is always cautious with requesting appropriations from free cash, but we feel that the investment will gain quick returns with increased investment. This is the essential question raised by one of the thought leaders of our time. Why can't we touch free cash? Simply put, free cash is like our savings account. We use it to pay for unanticipated expenses and to supplement future operating budgets. Some of those can be capital expenses like the fire department's compressor filling station we just funded, or in this case, the revenue shortfalls from the pandemic. Each year, whatever we don't spend that has been budgeted gets turned back to free cash. It is no longer obligated to a department for that particular fiscal year. While it's always good to shore up our free cash reserves, at times it makes sense for us to use free cash to support our departments and policy objectives. Lower revenue from the Rec Department puts pressure on our budget in the coming years. Investing in this necessary facility improves and puts the Rec Center in the best position to succeed as it pursues self-sufficiency, and it does so by making a bunch of kids happy who have had a really couple tough years and adds a great amenity to the neighborhood. After hearing some concerns about the project from neighbors, 2 public information sessions were held last week. Our DPW hand-delivered notices throughout the neighborhood. Last Friday, one of those sessions was held over Zoom, and one was held at the Mystic School on the following Saturday that included the Recreation Director, DPW Director, Assistant Town Manager, members of the Select Board, and the project's architect. Through our discussion, we were able to change some of the scope of the project to respond to the neighbors' concerns about impact, and we will be implementing these changes in the RFP before it is issued. The Select Board is requesting $200,000 for construction and site work for the multi-purpose sports court at the Mystic School. Please join us in voting yes on Article 18. Thank you.
Begin with the recommendations for town meetings consideration from boards and committees. On behalf of the school committee, do we have a recommendation?
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. The school committee recommends favorable action on Article 18, and this is subject to school committee will review and approve the project with the input of the Disability Access Commission and also the Policy Subcommittee.
Thank you. Further on the question, do we have a recommendation from the Finance Committee?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. The Finance Committee voted in favor of Article 18, but it was close. We voted in favor 7 to 5. And we had 3 main areas of concern, those who voted against it. One was process. There were concerns that this article went straight to you rather than going through Capitol. And we understand the need for it, but we recommend to you, town meeting, that you establish a process for all warrant articles that come before you so you can compare them in the same way that the Capital Planning Committee does, just so it's more apples to apples. The second concern was maintenance costs, but that was allayed. Nick said there wouldn't be much maintenance at all on this. And then the third concern was alternative funding sources. And while fundraising and other sources weren't considered strong solutions that were immediate, the use of ARPA funds still remains. So that's why some of our Finance Committee members hesitated. Thank you.
Thank you. Further on the question, do we have an update from Capitol? Mr. Jimmy Johnson, their chair.
Good evening. The Capital Committee deferred this issue to the Select Board, primarily because it's the first time it had come to Capital as an enterprise request fund, and we do not have control over the enterprise funding mechanism. So that's why we forwarded it to the Select Board.
Thank you. Town meeting members, there has been one resident who has requested to speak. They represent the neighborhood that is impacted directly by this project. In response to that, and to make your debate and your comments and questions as informed as possible, I would like to have them recognized now. Given that's a longstanding tradition to do so, I would ask that you honor our resident by providing them the opportunity to speak. All those in favor of having a non-resident address town meeting at this time, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say no. The ayes have it. I will ask Ms. Angela Murdo to please come forward.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm here representing the Marshall Road neighbors in regard to the Mystic School Sport Court. Though we had not received any information as abutters about this project as of 2 weeks ago, since then the neighbors have pulled together and worked hard to have our voices heard. We emailed town meeting members and attended 2 meetings held by town officials on short notice. We spoke again with the Select Board last Monday. And as a result, last Friday, a letter with adjustments to the plan was delivered to us on behalf of the Select Board, which all of you also received via email. We are encouraged that the adjustments discussed have been put into writing. There are still parts of the plan that are ambiguous. For example, the Select Board has repeatedly agreed to a meeting before the project goes out to bid, yet it appears that it is already out to bid with the old plans. So while we are hopeful for the pending meeting, we also hope that communications can continue to become even more open and transparent. We know some of you still have other concerns about this project, and we have some reservations as well. A week ago, we would have stood before you asking for a postponement on Article 18. Tonight, in the spirit of goodwill, we are here to let you know that the Select Board has been working with us, and we no longer look to stand in the way of anybody's vote preference in either direction. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much. Seeing that there are no other boards or committees rising, I welcome the microphones to town meeting members. If you have any questions or comments, please come to the microphones on either side.
Good evening. Brian Vernalia, Precinct 4. I stand in opposition to Article 18. This project, as we heard, bypassed the Capital Planning Committee despite being a capital project. It was eligible for capital funds. It was not ranked. We don't know where it would have fallen and what worthy project might have been a better use for our limited town funds. I've been told by many that a project like this would never be funded by the Capital Planning Committee, but given the supposed revenue, which was not really discussed, I'm not sure why not. Supposedly it has a 2-year payback. Virtually no project in town would have such a short payback. I think Capital Planning Committee would be interested in that. And speaking of those revenue numbers, they are high and unvetted. Why? Because the project never went to the Capital Planning Committee. Is $100,000 a year realistic? We just don't know. But direct use of the court can only account for $20,000 to $30,000 a year. The remaining $70,000 to $80,000 is from presumed additional enrollment in REP. So in summary, I urge you to vote no. This project should be resubmitted to Capital Planning Committee this summer. At the same time, we should continue to engage the community. I'm pleased that they started engaging with the community, and determine the true neighborhood impact and necessary mitigation. If the need and the revenue are as significant as we've been told, and the community concerns are determined and addressed, this project will be ready to vote at fall town meeting. If the CPC doesn't choose to put this project forward, that suggests something is not as it seems. So please vote no on Article 18, and let's do this the right way next time. Thank you.
By the way, Mr. Vanellia, happy birthday. He turned 50 today.
Hello, my name is Jim Ferguson. I'm also Precinct 4. I also have concerns about that didn't go through Capital Planning Committee. I noticed in Article 30, there was a Capital Planning gave money to a school to put a new energy-efficient boiler. It saved money, and in that Article 30, that savings is being returned back to the Capital Planning Committee. So I guess my question to the moderator, has anyone, if this new court is going to bring in $100,000 worth of income over the next several years, I don't know how long the life of the actual court, sometimes they last like 10 years. Was there any discussion on whether the rec department would repay this loan back and put it into, it didn't come from capital planning account, but if they're going to benefit financially, could they pay back that amount over the course of the life of the court?
Thank you. To the Select Board, could you provide information to town meeting on the life of the court and if they can repay the money to free cash that is being used to build the court?
Thank you for the question. Happy birthday, Brian. I think part of the rationale of the Select Board was that we've been subsidizing the rec department about $175,000 for the past however many years, right? Certainly before my time, it's just a part of the budget. That increased to over $400,000 during the pandemic, and a couple $100,000 or $300,000 this past year. So what we're trying to do is recover not just the money, but the kids coming back, right? We've started to get some more students that are paying fees to come back into our programs, but they haven't all come back like we see in the schools, right? So we somewhat tie the revenue to the kids and the programs, and we've increased quite a few programs, including the junior basketball program, which Nick had created really kind of out of thin air. And on Saturday mornings, it's full of kids that had never been there before playing basketball. Enka had donated a hoop inside as well, which has been really nice. And so I think that we do see this as a financial return to the budget, even if it's not directly returning it there. It's really pushing off future operating budget liabilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Betancourt. Ms. Savage.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Carol Savage, Precinct 5. Through you to the Select Board, can you please explain your rationale in using this process rather than going through capital planning?
To the Select Board, could you provide town meeting information about why this process and capital planning directed to you?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Through you to Ms. Savage. As Mr. Johnson had mentioned, we did send it to Capital Planning. They felt because it was an enterprise fund that it should return back to us and to REC to figure out what to do with it. So this was our solution, and to the question of ARPA funds that was raised as well. You know, we've got just over $5 million left with ARPA funds, and per the usual, we have about $12 million in requests, right? So there's a lot of need out there for infrastructure and various support for the schools and for the town water and sewer. So we've got a lot ahead of us, but we did go to Capital. And, you know, I think, you know, my experience has been over the years that certain things move through the capital process, and some things that we identify as high need, they kind of move forward without it. We funded the lights at the Johnson Ridge intersection. As you saw, we just funded the compressor for the fire department. So sometimes there's a greater need in moving it forward a little bit more quickly. And so if we push this off to the summer and we go through the process to the fall, construction season again starts the following summer, right? So we're pushing it off another whole year, and this already started a year ago. So, and one of the things I will mention is that was raised by Ms. Murdaugh is that we have officially confirmed that there is no bid out there for this project. It has been canceled. Our staff tries to get ahead of every project we possibly can, and we know that any sort of time is money. And as you can see, we've been coming back to Capital for more money. I mean, we've been coming back to town meeting for more money for certain projects that we've already approved because we put bids out and nobody responds, or they come out that, you know, 30, 40,000 above for simple projects. So that's our rationale. I think our staff is highly engaged, and they try to anticipate as much as possible, and they were trying to anticipate a busy construction season by getting a bid out, but it's officially been canceled. So I will say that.
Thank you, Mr. Badcourt. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Madam Moderator. Amy Poftak, Precinct 3. I stand before you because my child has been at the Rec Center RAP program for the past 5 years. I can attest it is a wonderful program that provides kids with a very safe and fun place to be after school. I'm supporting this article. There's just a few quick points I wanted to make. The children spend a large portion of their time outdoors, so that court is really a critical part of the program. And it is true that the rest of the facility does need work, but I think this is a good place to start. It will make a direct impact on the children who use it every day, and also further the Rec Center's goal of making their programming more attractive. The Rec Center provides an important service to the town, and we should be invested in positioning it for success. Finally, I'm concerned about the rising costs of construction, and I worry that if we put the hold on this project, it's only going to get more expensive. So I would encourage us not to wait and would urge you to vote yes on this article. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Poftak. Seeing no other town meeting members rise, I believe we are ready for the vote. Any town meeting members who are outside of the auditorium, please come join us. We will give you a few moments while we set up the vote. We will be using our clickers. As of right now, we are voting on Article 18. This is to appropriate money for a multi-purpose sports court at the Mystic School. Press green if you would like a yes, a red if you are no to appropriate money, and yellow if you would like to abstain. At this time, the green light is on. Please cast your votes. A majority vote is required. Uh, 133 in the affirmative, 18 in the negative. The affirmative has it, and the motion passes. Moving on, we are going to Article 26. 26 and 27 kind of go hand in hand together. And in response to that, the proponent of the articles has asked to do the presentation for both at the same time for clarity. In response, they will be extending past the 10 minutes, but instead of doing 20 minutes combined for the two articles, they're going to do it, my understanding is cut that significantly. And so with the approval of town meeting, I would like to extend their time at this point to 15 minutes for Article 26. All those in favor? All those opposed? The ayes have it. It is moved and seconded that $5,980,000 is appropriated to pay costs of the design, construction, and renovation of the Sanborn Carriage House for the purpose of accommodating the relocation of the Winchester Public Schools Administration or central offices from the Parker School as outlined in Article 28 of the 2021 Fall Town Meeting and in the Winchester Public Schools 10-year Facilities Master Plan approved July 2017, and for the payment of all costs incidental and related thereto, that to meet this appropriation, the Treasurer, with approval of the Select Board, is authorized to borrow said amount under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 7, Subsection 1, or under any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the town, therefore, that the Educational Facilities Planning and Building Committee shall be authorized to have oversight of the project, and that in accordance with Section 4-2 of the Town of Winchester Home Rule Charter, the town manager shall have the authority to enter into contracts and approve the projects with respect to approve payments with respect to the project. This article requires a 2/3 vote to pass. The sponsor of the article is the EFPBC, the Educational Facilities Planning and Building Committee. On behalf of the EFPBC is Mr. Chris Dixon.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, and happy birthday, Brian. We'll start a trend tonight. If you really want to score points, I think it's Dr. Vanalia. Madam Moderator, I have a very exciting announcement I'd like to make before I start tonight regarding the Lynch project.
Please do. We'd love to hear it.
You all will recall from opening night, Monday, April 28th, John Fallon came to the microphone and presented the Wellfield land transfer parcel under Article 6 that was necessary to support the preferred option of the EFPBC. We've been calling that for months N5. So the exciting news is we will not have to call it that anymore, because on Wednesday, April 30th, I'm excited to share the board of the Massachusetts School Building Authority voted enthusiastically to support our choice for the new Lynch, and that is how we're going to continue to call it from now on. So we're very excited. This is absolutely a big deal. It represents an important pivot in the project. So now we're going to go from what has really been very high-level conceptual work into a much more detailed schematic design exercise. So the architecture and project management team will come back in the fall with a much more detailed project and cost estimate and a project funding agreement, and then ultimately we expect that will go for a debt exclusion override in January. So thank you to your support, as well as the Select Board for the transfer under Article 6. And so with that, I am pleased to be joined by Charlie Hay from Tappe Architects tonight to support this exciting upcoming work and the eventual construction of the new Lynch School. We need to get going on swing space for this project with Articles 26 and 27. You may have heard about them. Article 26 seeks to move central office from the Parkhurst School, where it is today, making space available to Lynch students. And Article 27 gets us started on the procurement of modular classrooms required as well. So let's begin tonight with Article 26. What is the big idea? It is to fulfill the goal of the district's facilities master plan. We seek $6 million in funding to complete the design documents you partially funded in the fall and renovate the Sanborn Carriage House as the permanent home for the district's central administrative offices. Depending on the actual interest rate secured in the length of the term, be it 20 or 25 years, the debt service has been projected by management at something on the order of $440,000 to $460,000 per year. $6 million is a lot of money. What value can we derive from such an investment? A vacated Parkhurst is valuable as swing space to Lynch students who we wish to move off-site during construction. Though Parkhurst is not large enough to accommodate all students from Lynch, as it did for VO in 2011, having a 30,000 square foot elementary school building available means we avoid over $2 million in temporary modular classroom costs to the Lynch project. Once the new Lynch is completed, Parkhurst will once again be vacant by July of 2025 and available for lease. Current market indicators tell us that Parkhurst could generate between $20 and $30 a foot today, and rental rates are going up. Parkhurst has the potential to generate between $3 and $4 million in 5 years, once leased. But the fall of 25 actually falls in fiscal year 26. This is important. Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 3 allows us to lease Parkhurst, but revenue does not revert to the general fund until FY27, or July of 2026. The challenge, therefore, is how to bridge this gap in time until revenue is available from Parkhurst leasing to begin covering the debt service. Our understanding of market leasing rates today suggests an annual surplus of 6 figures once the debt service is covered, monies that could be set aside for ongoing renewal and replacement costs at Parkhurst, or perhaps flow directly to the Building Stabilization Fund under the control of the Capital Planning Committee. Finally, in securing a permanent home for central office, we avoid the short-term expenses and disruption of relocation and even rental, kicking the can no more. Here's an image of a typical Parkhurst classroom today to give you an idea of what Lynch students can expect in swing space and what prospective tenants might see as well moving forward. As I described a moment ago, the Parkhurst School is not sufficient on its own to accommodate all Lynch students off-site. Even with a vacated Parkhurst, some measure of temporary modular classrooms are required. The EFPBC's preferred swing space option, we're bringing you 2 options tonight. The preferred option is passage of both Articles 26 and 27. The language presented here is right out of your town meeting booklet. With passage of Article 26, the Carriage House becomes the new permanent home for central office, freeing up Parkhurst for use as swing space. Article 27, on the other hand, is much more limited to an ask of $170,000 for architectural, engineering, and management services to prepare a design and procurement package for temporary modular classrooms and ancillary work. The ultimate as-built scope of Article 27 is akin to a choose-your-own-adventure book. Should Article 26 pass tonight, the modular classroom package funded under Article 27 will scope out the leasing of 8 modular classrooms along with the necessary site and utility work to accommodate them. However, if Article 26 fails to pass, then this package will scope out twice the number of temporary classrooms, as well as more significant site and utility work required. TAPE architects will explain this in more detail in a few minutes. So with this broad overview out of the way, and recognizing we have quite a few new town meeting members with us this spring for whom this project and process is unfamiliar, let's go through a quick review of the history of some of these elements. The school district's central administrative office has moved from place to place over many years. In general, these locations have been somewhat opportunistic in repurposed space never designed or intended for such a purpose. This was the case with central office's move to Parkhurst in 2013, its occupancy of a portion of Lynch years earlier, and in the 1970s, the team was actually housed at the Sanborn House on the Ambrose campus. While some infrastructure upgrades were made for the Carriage House in 2005 during Ambrose construction, we first began to think about central office locations strategically back in 2012. At that time, we had just redistricted in preparation for the new and expanded VO. Statewide enrollment had fell by 3% in the preceding decade, and our enrollment in Winchester had soared by over 30%. We were bursting at the seams in desperate need of educational and support space. So in addition to the newly expanded VO, the school committee saw the need to recapture instructional space at Lynch by moving central office someplace else. And it was at this time the Carriage House came back into serious consideration. Built in 1908 along with the main Sanborn House, the Carriage House was, as it is today, school department property under the control of the school committee. This historic building had many years prior been gutted, had been gutted of all historic fixtures, furnishings, hardware, and so on, and was last used as a preschool in the early 2000s. The building had some appeal to the school department, given its adjacency to Ambrose and the opportunity to run professional development on non-school PD days. However, in 2012, with such explosive enrollment growth, the district needed to find a home for central office quickly. A Carriage House solution would require more discussion, study, and of course, funding. So in early 2013, it was determined that central office would relocate from Lynch to Parkhurst, once one of 10 smaller neighborhood schools in Winchester. From the 1950s through the early 1970s, Parkhurst had been used as swing space for students during the renovation of Lincoln, the construction of Ambrose, and again for VO when we put about $1 million into the building to pull it out of mothballs beginning in 2011. So with Parkhurst becoming vacant again in 2013, when the Vincent Owen opened, central office moved into this building, but with some important conditions and understandings with the town. At approximately 30,000 square feet, there was concern expressed by the Finance Committee, town meeting, and others over a relatively modest space need, at the time just under 7,000 square feet, taking over the entire upper floor of an elementary school. The school committee pledged that the central office move to Parkhurst would not be a long-term solution. We indicated at the time that we would need the space for at least 3 years, hopefully not more than 10. So in 2016, the district's facilities master plan working group carefully evaluated the central office question of location, tying up large spaces not needed and potentially useful as a revenue stream or swing space for future construction. Parkhurst was once again reaffirmed as a shorter-term solution for our administrative team. The master plan did consider several other options, including inclusion in a new Lynch or Morocco or even Mystic. So in the summer of 17, 5 years ago this month, the school committee voted to approve the Carriage House option, and we shared this with town meeting. The Carriage House seemed to be a good fit for our administrative needs, but it was recognized at the time that more work would be required to confirm the fit, cost, and timeliness of the solution. So subsequently, for FY19, town meeting approved $100,000 to fund space programming and schematic design for relocation to the Carriage House. The work was approved by advertisement by Town Hall in 2020, and TAPE architects were selected for the project. TAPE was familiar with Winchester. They are the architects of the Ambrose School and the Vincent Owen. Later in 2020, TAPE was selected by the MSBA Designer Selection Panel as the architects for the new Lynch replacement project. Concurrent with the programming and schematic design of the Carriage House in the spring of 21, the school committee did consider whether central office space at the new Lynch in partnership with the MSBA might be an option. In some instances, the state does permit districts to include central office in school projects. However, they make this determination only on a case-by-case basis, and in every instance, the costs are not reimbursable. So in addition to the development of a functional space program for central office and a Carriage House design, TAPE was further charged with evaluating the challenges and opportunities associated with both scenarios, Carriage House and Lynch. The design team evaluated key aspects of each option, which are presented in a special public meeting right here in September at the high school and discussed at length in subsequent meetings with public comment. Seeing no meaningful cost savings associated with a Lynch-based central office, with both options estimated at close to $6 million in project costs, and a nearly 2-year difference in timing, with a Carriage House solution being available well ahead of Lynch construction, making Parkhurst available for swing space for Lynch students. The school committee voted in October to affirm the master plan recommendation designating a restored and renovated Carriage House as the future home for central office and to identify funding sources for the work. Last fall, town meeting voted to fund the next step of design, what we call design development, taking the schematic design and preliminary architectural work with estimates one step further, this time with detailed engineering drawings and updated estimates. We're very pleased tonight that the project cost estimated and shared with you last fall at $5.95 million has held firm at $5.98 today. In a word, this $6 million project establishes a long-sought, purpose-built, permanent home for administration. It achieves key goals for Winchester's Climate Action Plan as an all-electric facility with substantial savings in energy costs, And just as importantly, the project frees up the Parkhurst School to be used as swing space during Lynch construction, as well as the opportunity for revenue generation being leased. Madam Moderator, I'm happy to hand it off now to our architect from TAPE, Charlie Hay.
Mr. Hay, welcome.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you to town meeting members for allowing me to speak. I will go very quickly because I know we have allotted time, but obviously this all comes back to the Lynch project, and just as to finish Chris's comments about progress, we've gotten through the feasibility study level of this project and are proceeding into schematic design. And many of you may have seen images of the project as it's been developed with the school building committee. The site plan places this new building to the north of the existing Lynch School and to the south of the soccer fields that are there now, and opens up the site to a considerable degree to allow for parking, roadways, active play, and outdoor learning. So it is an exciting project. It's an exciting opportunity to revision this school. So during this design phase, the initial thought was to try to keep as many students on site as we possibly could during construction. However, as we continued to study this, as the school committee and the building committee considered this, it became obvious that that was really a significant constraint. That orange box you see is what a contractor really would need to build this new building at a minimum. And you can see how incredibly intrusive it is to the site itself. And the idea of trying to operate the Lynch at the same time as a new building was being built was ultimately considered to be not a good idea, which I think is absolutely right. So the project pivoted from keeping students on site to taking students off site. So thus, the importance of swing space has become even more significant. And as Chris has articulated, Article 26 considers the Carriage House as one option. The proposed site for the Carriage House would expand parking to accommodate the needs of district administration. That would be down the hill from where the parking is now. The site plan limits kind of impacts to the Ambrose School. Pickup and drop-off will not be impacted. The district administration starts and stops at a different time than the school. We don't expect any impact there. In addition, we don't expect any significant impact with construction. This is not a large project. This is not a project with a lot of excavation. It's simply renovating the exterior of the building, renovating the interior of the building. The contractor would be limited to the area that's being developed. We did develop plans. I don't have time to talk to you about them, but this fully accomplishes housing district administration and creating a permanent home so they stop bouncing around to different facilities, and creating a purpose-built adaptive reuse of the building. The exterior would be fully restored with a nice new entrance. And I think it would create a very welcoming place, so members of the public, parents, prospective parents who do come to visit, administrators will have a place to sit and wait and can be welcomed. This is a different project, but this is an example of one of our firm's adaptive reuse projects. This happens to be in Bridgewater, but this was an old school in terrible condition, and they decided to make it into their new town hall, and this is the outcome. And this is, they're incredibly proud of this, and it just goes to show the sort of opportunities that adaptive reuse, not only is it a very sustainable approach, but it is a way to maintain your historic heritage. You are a community of beautiful historic buildings, as many as any town in the Commonwealth, as far as I can tell. And you can create wonderful spaces that are totally appropriate for administration. Certainly, and this building is in terrible need of restoration. It's not going to last too much longer without some attention. So, as Chris has mentioned, the Parkhurst School has become the focus of possible swing space, and Article 26 and Article 27 together accomplish swing space for the Lynch project by relocating district administration to the Carriage House. Over the course of the next year, the Carriage House project, we anticipate about a 13-month construction, design and construction window if we begin soon. And then the procurement and fabrication and lease and removal of 8 modular classrooms, which would accommodate most of the Lynch population on site. But this is a fairly limited modular addition because district administration would have been relocated to the Carriage House at that point. If Article 26 is not taken up and voted on, then the backup option, which is not the preferred option by the building committee or the school committee, is to construct up to 16 lease up to 16 modular classrooms at the Lynch. It is difficult to fit them on the site. It will require completely new parking up on the softball field above. It will include some limited improvements to the Parker School. And of course, in the case of modulars, this is not a permanent contribution to the building stock of the community. It is a temporary measure. The Carriage House becomes a permanent improvement. The modular classrooms do not. So this is really the consideration of Article 27. And so with that, I think that's probably our allotted time. Thank you very much.
That is. I was just about to tell you. Thank you very much. At this time, recommendations of boards and committees will come forward. First up will be the Select Board. Chair, Mr. Mucci, could you provide recommendation to town meeting for their consideration? As they pull up his slideshow, just for town meeting members who are new, the EFBBC is the Educational Facilities Planning and Building Committee. They are charged with the preparation and periodic adjustments of the school facility master plan and also makes recommendations and oversees design and construction for all the school district facilities. For example, they oversaw the construction of the school district facility here that we currently use. There are 11 members on their committee, which there is at least 1 registered architect and 1 registered engineer, and the superintendent of schools also sits on it. And the appointing authority includes a select board and school committee for 4 seats. The moderator does 5 seats, and 1 seat is by FinCom. Fun fact. All right, take it away.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I'm here to present the Select Board recommendations on both Article 26 and 27. As you can see, the Select Board recommendations for Article 26 was unanimous with 1 abstention for unfavorable action. On Article 27, the Select Board voted unanimously 5-0 favorable action. The Select Board's #1 priority is the rebuilding of the Lynch School. And then after that, as soon as we can, to rebuild Morocco School. We are concerned about this project on Article 26 for the Carriage House for several reasons. First, the financial risk. Use of operating budget to pay the debt service is never a good practice. There's been no funding for the Carriage House debt service in the current budget or financial plan that you've heard so much about during this town meeting. There's a potential impact to the town's AAA bond rating, which I'll get to in a minute. And certainly there's uncertainties in the rental forecast for the Parkhurst School, and we still don't know what capital repairs need to be made to the Parkhurst School to make it rentable. Is the Carriage House a capital priority? As you've heard from the Capital Committee and you've seen the report, there are significant capital needs in this town. Other school buildings, repairs to several of our schools, and the Morocco Project. Alternatives for the central office besides what you've seen tonight, which is the preferred option if Article 26 should fail, have not been vetted. So what's this AAA bond rating? Well, in January, Moody's gave Winchester a AAA bond rating. And you can see, highlighted in red, the factors that could lead to a downgrade of this rating. A trend of operating deficits leading to a decline in reserves and liquidity, material increase in the debt burden, and inability to maintain funding plan towards long-term liabilities. What would a downgrade mean for Winchester? Well, first of all, we're one of 13 AAA rated communities out of the 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts, if you exclude Boston and Cambridge. You see the list there. Of these 13 towns, which we compare ourselves regularly to many of them, the average free cash percentage of revenue is 16.4%. A AAA bond rating allows us to fund large projects with a debt at low impact to our operating budget. So hypothetically, and I mean hypothetically, because I know no numbers have been put out, if the Lynch School project came in at $60 million, the difference between borrowing at a AAA bond rating or AA bond rating would save the town approximately $1.9 million. And this is only one example. Think about all the capital projects we borrow on and add that together. You heard when we were discussing Article 23 about our operating reserves. And you can see that, right now, we're in a good financial position at 14.35% operating reserves. You can see that one thing Moody's wants us to consider, and the Select Board will consider this, is a future operating reserve policy to increase that number to 8 to 12%. Remember, the 13 other communities, if you average their reserves, they're at 16.4%. Something we need to do in this town. However, this year, in 2022, this spring town meeting, we need to borrow we need to use $690,706 of free cash to balance the budget. So next year, when we're all sitting here, we will need to use $2.47 million in free cash just to balance the budget. And you can follow the path forward, 2024, 2025, 2026. And these numbers are based on the models that our staff have put together. What's not included in those numbers is the debt on the Carriage House. You can see what it does to the financial picture and how we need to deal with it, in addition to our needs already on the municipal side. This will add approximately $1.5 million in debt service over the next fiscal years. And this is before we even collect a cent of rent, as optimistically predicted by the EFPBC. And this also assumes that a general obligation bond will issue on July 1st, 2023. Given the rates and the way they're going up, this would probably be the path we would choose. I think the Capital Committee has eloquently stated our needs. They put together a 5-year plan that shows that we have approximately a $20 million shortfall between capital needs and available stabilization fund over the next 5 years.
Mr. Mucci, you've reached your 5 minutes.
Madam Moderator, can I have a few more minutes if this is Article 26 and 27?
How much do you need? Can you give us a time?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. For town meeting members, all those in favor? All those opposed? 2 minutes it is.
Thank you. As you can see, the partial list of near-term projects, they exceed $18 million. This includes repairs to the McCall School, the Lincoln School repairs, the Town Hall HVAC, the Mystic School mechanical, and so on. You'll see in there that there's already school projects in the capital queue that have a greater need. We also have nearly $12 million in federally mandated disability access improvements that we only contribute $125,000 to a year. Another capital improvement that we must take more appropriate action on. So, as you've heard, the preferred option for Article 26 and to relocate central office, we believe there are other options that would make Parkhurst available as total swing space for the Lynch community, which is something we think is important. There's lease of temporary office space. Cummings Properties has offered $22 a square foot, and that's before any discount given the nature of the project, which we know Cummings is extremely generous and charitable. There could be a debt exclusion override for the project. There are available modular classrooms at the Ambrose School not being used. We could wait until we realize the gain of Parkhurst for a sale or rental and apply those earnings to fund the project. There's the Morocco School rebuild to consider as well, the Mystic School, and acquisition of other property. We've used Town Hall in the past for housing temporary office space during projects like this. So vote on Article 26 at your own risk. You see the committees opposed to Article 26. The Select Board, the Finance Committee will follow me, and Capital Planning Committee. You could see what is at risk in voting yes on Article 26. We're not necessarily against the idea of a permanent home for central office, but the way this project is funding is going to cripple our budget, and we have concerns, and we wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't come before this town meeting and tell you that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mucci. Further on the question, do we have a recommendation by the school committee? On behalf of the school committee, their chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. School committee recommended favorable action on Article 26.
Thank you. Recommendation from the planning board. Mr. Jirius, I believe that's why.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. The planning board approached this article solely from the standpoint of the Carriage House as a historic resource. We did not review the financial impacts of this article, and our recommendation does not take them into account. Within those constraints, the planning board recommends favorable action based upon the adaptive reuse and preservation of an existing town historical resource. Without action, the Carriage House will essentially be demolished through neglect. We also wanted to point out that had this town passed the Community Preservation Act, we would have funds available to work on this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Further on the question, recommendation from FinCom. Chair, Dr. Blackwell.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Sure. So you'll hear a lot of common themes. I think the Finance Committee agrees with the Select Board on many, many counts. And one thing we heard tonight was the common goals of Articles 26 and 27 are to create swing space for Lynch. That's why we're talking about it now. That's why we're voting it now, because Lynch is the priority. And the Finance Committee, one of our talking points is that we don't want to support anything that would put the Lynch project in jeopardy, be it schedule, cost, or otherwise. One risk we identified is schedule. 6 months to finish the Carriage House. Sounds very aggressive to us, and anyone who's had a construction project in their own home knows there are delays, especially in this environment where supply chain issues exist, labor shortages, so this was a concern. Also, the risks of building on an occupied site. You heard others talk about the priority of moving Lynch students off-site to make construction easier. Well, now we have construction really near Ambrose, so we think that must raise cost or other risk. We heard one suggestion that a crossing guard, a police detail might be needed at this intersection of workers and kids walking to Ambrose. That's an added cost we're not really acknowledging. Financing. So what's the impact of the funding options? If we take this on as debt, it could lead to what Rich explained as a material increase that may lead to a downgrade of our AAA bond rating. If we use free cash, that could accelerate an operational override and competes with other capital needs. So the funding, the $5.98 million project cost represents 4% of our total outstanding debt. And we didn't think there was time in the schedule to allow for a debt exclusion override. So as Select Board Chair Mucci explained, what's the impact of the bond rating? So we did one example here. comparing the interest rate on a 20-year bond using available rates that fluctuate every day, but we found these rates and compared the annual interest on $10 million for a AAA rating and a AA rating. So if you are downgraded, you'll increase your interest rates, and in this notional example, we show that a difference of 35 basis points would lead to paying $35,000 more in interest annually for new debt over the life of the loan. So while our 3-year plan, modified with Article 26 interest payments, would not accelerate our operational override, it's still there and looming in FY25. But what this is doing is competing. If you pass Article 26, the debt service will put in jeopardy our bond rating and compete our scarce supply of free cash for the required capital projects. There's also uncertainties and other cost assumptions. How many Lynch students will move? We hear all, but we've also heard that we're waiting on the fall enrollment numbers to make that decision. Open seats have not been considered. There could be additional costs for transportation or building. There are serious assumptions on the timing and the potential revenue for Parkhurst. And also, the 2017 master plan, which we keep on hearing about, their assumptions are based on unrealized enrollment projections. So none of us, I think, use maps from 2017. Why are we still using a master plan from 2017? I wanted to take you through a few alternatives for the relocation of the central administration. So these are the two proposals that have been put forth. Article 26, which renovates the Carriage House, moves the administration, and provides swing space and 8 modulars. Article 27 doesn't do anything to the Carriage House. You keep the administration in Parkhurst, and you provide swing space and 16 modulars, where there's other solutions that could reduce the number of modulars. For example, why not move the administration to modulars? You still have swing space for Lynch students, but you only need 8 modulars now. Why not put the administration in rental space? We heard more details on the quote for the Cummings location. And there are many other options that have been raised and not fully vetted. Renting St. Mary's, using space in Town Hall or multiple elementary schools, which we know have empty classrooms. Using Mystic School. Using temporary work-from-home programs for the limited 20-month period. Or combining these options. I don't think we know, we're not suggesting what the best plan is, but we're emphasizing that that needs to be discussed. The only timely decision that's required is providing swing space for Lynch. So that's why the Finance Committee voted unanimously against Article 26. It's added risk to the Lynch project, timing and cost, added costs and potential disruption of the Ambrose School, problematic funding sources using the town operating budget versus the alternative, which would be a debt exclusion override. There's no time, we think, for a debt exclusion override vote, but increasing the town's debt risks a downgrade of the bond rating, which has serious financial consequences. There's uncertainties in the number of students. This Article 26 is the most expensive short-term alternative for the administration. And there's assumptions on timing and potential revenue for Parkhurst. So that's also why the Finance Committee voted unanimously to support Article 27, because we feel it's more aligned with a lower cost, lower risk Lynch reconstruction. Thank you.
Thank you. Further recommendation from the Capital Planning Committee. Chair, Mr. Johnson.
On behalf of the Capital Committee, we'd like to wish Brian a happy birthday. We were going to sing, but it's really not appropriate. We don't have the time. The Capital Committee voted unfavorable recommendation on Article 26. There were 4 for it, 1 opposed, and 2 members who recently joined the Capital Committee abstained. It's not unusual, but it's somewhat unprecedented for the Capital Committee to vote action favorable on action on articles the Capital Committee did not sponsor or co-sponsor. So some explanation is appropriate. The Capital Committee has a long history regarding the Carriage House proposals. Capital was presented with 2 proposals in the fall of 2017. One was from the building department that requested and noted the deterioration of the roof and asked for funding to begin preliminary design to replace the roof. In the same year, the school department asked for funding to investigate the Carriage House in its current configuration to see if it would meet the needs for the school administration. Concerns were expressed at the time that no funding source was identified for the construction. However, since this was an initial investigation, and it was just to determine if the space could even house the school administration, Capital voted to bundle the 2 projects. The schools did its need assessment and found that the current space did not meet the required amount of space needed for the administration, and proceeded to extend the investigation to include the expansion of the building envelope. This was beyond the scope of the original funding that Capital authorized. The schools asked for additional funds to expand the advanced design work. Capital declined to fund that additional design work. Capital Committee ranks projects and additional design work did not gather enough support to be ranked high enough to be approved. After that, the school committee did not come back to the Carriage House for consideration of funding, but proceeded to go directly to town meeting to ask to procure funding. It not only would have been the end of the Capital's involvement, however, it was stated in a public hearing meeting that the Disability Access Commission, which receives funds from the Capital Stabilization Fund, had voted to use a substantial amount of its annual appropriation to pay interest charges on Article 26 for 3 years, FY 23, 24, and 25. This pass-through of the stabilization funds to support Article 26 alarmed us, not just because of the potential use of funds on the project that were directly intended to be used for handicap accessible issues, but there was also a concern that town meeting might assert that Capital did in fact endorse Article 26. The Capital Stabilization Fund was the original source of DAC funding. Capital Committee held a meeting and DAC and EFPBC chairs were present to discuss the proposed funding of Article 26 in general. This winter, as noted by the Select Board and the Finance Committee, town departments and school departments were asked to develop a 5-year projection of capital projects and capital needs. This list was analyzed against probable funding availability in the stabilization funds. The analysis showed that approximately $20 million shortfall between the needs and the funding availability over the next 5 years. There were many, many requests, too many to even mention. But as seen earlier, a few of the projects were McCall School repairs, multiple projects, Lincoln School repairs, multiple projects, Town Hall HVAC, Mystic School mechanical, traffic improvements townwide, library windows, DPW buildings. Put aside the question of whether the pass-through funding was appropriate or not, members felt that Article 26 would draw off town's funds as needed for the other operating budgets and capital problems. The Capital Committee requested the Capital Committee recommends unfavorable action on Article 26. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other boards or committees who have recommendations? Please come down. Seeing no one rise, town meeting members, it's time for your questions and comments. If you can please make your way to the microphones and stand on the blue X's, and we will begin town meeting's debate and discussion on this. Mr. Dobbins.
Yes, Madam Moderator. I'd like to address the town meeting in opposition to Article 26. Good evening. After studying both Articles 26 and 27 closely, including listening to the EFPBC meetings, touring Lynch, observing presentations from the Finance Committee and the EFPBC, discussing with Precinct and other town meeting members, I have concluded that while I strongly support the Lynch redevelopment and the need to move school administration out of Parkhurst for the needed swing space in support of that effort, the proposed $6 million design, construction, and renovation of the Carriage House is simply too high risk for town meeting to approve. My reasons are as follows. Number one, cost. We're told the $6 million cost estimate that was developed late last summer will remain unchanged through this fall when bids will be solicited. This does not stand to reason. I have heard directly from present and former EFPBC members that bids are coming in upwards of 30% higher than estimates because of inflation and supply chain issues. We heard it here last week from the gentleman that was detailing the work needed on the downtown bridge railings. In fact, we heard it on the Mystic rebuild too. This merely confirms what we are all experiencing in our daily lives. Factoring in unknowns, this puts the Carriage House estimate likely in the $8 to $10 million range, which will have major negative impacts on Winchester's long-term financial health and its ability to complete other high-priority projects, including Morocco's rebuild, in the near term. Are there other lower-cost options available to move the administrators to? I think so. The cost of this project alone make this article high risk, but there are other reasons. 2, the schedule is tight. Any delays will increase costs of this project and the Lynch rebuild. Why not find office space that is ready to go now? The construction schedule has little slack and is proposed to begin this coming winter. The schedule further makes this article high risk. 3, disruption and safety concerns at Ambrose and with students on site during construction. Perhaps these can be mitigated by working after school hours or on weekends, but these changes will increase costs and further increase risk. In conclusion, with inflation and interest rates on the rise and supply chain issues showing no signs of abating, approving this project further clouds our town's finances on top of looming overrides in 24 and 25, which will delay the needed Morocco rebuild. I have little confidence in the $6 million cost estimate holding, but have great confidence that there is a cheaper, low-risk option to move the 18 school administrators out of Parkhurst to accommodate the Lynch rebuild, and I urge my fellow town meeting members to vote no on this article. Thank you.
Thank you. Further on the question? Stage right, Mike.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Kathleen Bodie, Precinct 3. I rise to ask my fellow town meeting members and our board to think about a different timeline that's proposed in the Article 26. First of all, as a preface to my remarks, I want to say that I fully support the recommendation that all students at Lynch be moved during construction. I also think the Carriage House is a great solution for the permanent home of our school administration. It would also save a very historic building in town. The location would be on a school property, which is always advantageous for central office. But the other people have mentioned, the Finance Committee, Board of Select, that there are a lot of issues around cost, being able to complete the project on time, and whether they even want to have the Carriage House be a permanent solution and look at other options. I would propose that the funding for the Carriage House be part of the debt exclusion override vote. It would qualify as swing space. It would not be reimbursed. It would not be partnered with MSBA. But swing space costs can be part of the project cost. And in doing so, we would be able to have a permanent solution for central administration, we would save an historic building, which likely will have to be torn down if no money is put into it in the next few years. And by having central office move for a year, it would be the 23-24 school year, we would be able to avoid the extra cost of 16 modulars. Actually be 8 additional modulars. I realize that this is very disruptive to central administration. I know that very well. But I think that the outcome of being able to accomplish our goals around permanent solution for admin space, being able to not have 16 modulars at the Parkhurst site for Lynch, is actually worth the disruption. And there are many suggestions of where central administration could go for that 1 year. Splitting between schools or town hall, I think it's important that central administration stay in Winchester, not be outside of Winchester, but there are many ways to configure this. So my proposal would mean that I would not be voting for Article 26 because I would like this to happen, but in a different way. We had a graph last week that showed that it was 6 months from funding, doing documents, bids, contracts, which would be accomplished before construction happened. If the vote for the debt exclusion override is in January, assuming MSBA approves the project cost, then we would have 5 months to do all this pre-work, and the heavy construction would occur during the summer and not impact Ambrose. So I'm in favor of what the intent is of all of this. I'm just suggesting a different timeline. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Through you to town meeting, I'm Susan DeLeo, Precinct 5. I speak tonight in opposition to Article 26. The Carriage House is not required for the very necessary Lynch rebuild, and in fact, it only acts as a very problematic roadblock to the rebuild. I oppose Article 26 for the following reasons. First, the proponents have not met the burden of demonstrating that this is a necessary spend of $6 million of free cash. In my conversations with residents and fellow town meeting members about this article, there's been a lot of deliberations of the options that were presented by FinCom. But this leaves me to the one question. It's not the duty of town meeting members to flesh out the other options, right? We are supposed to be presented with an article, and the proponents are supposed to meet the obligation of demonstrating that it is necessary. Second, the proposed cost and timeline, as many people have spoken about, are likely to run over time and over budget. I don't have to go through that anymore. We all know what the supply chain issues are in this day and age. Third, while it alleviates the burden of attending a campus under construction for the Lynch students, it places the burden of construction squarely on the shoulders of the Ambrose campus. For the past 3 academic years, the students of Winchester Public Schools have had many disruptions to their learning. If Article 26 passes, by next December, the entire Ambrose campus will become a construction site. It was mentioned also in the September 28th, 2021 meeting by Mr. Nixon that the Carriage House is filled with hazardous materials and requires significant abatement. This abatement will be occurring during while school's in session. A reminder, the students have to have their classroom windows open due to COVID ventilation. So hazardous chemical or hazardous material abatement will be occurring with windows open about 30 to 50 yards away. Fourth and finally, the article is an overspend for an unnecessary building. The COVID pandemic has changed the way we work. Remote and hybrid work schedules, along with shared office space, are both more sustainable and have low environmental impact.
Big, expensive brick and mortar buildings are the past. We can do better. We can do this a new way. We should take the time needed to fully flesh out the ideas and the needs of central office going forward, and how these needs and issues can be addressed best in a very clear financial way for the town's future. And then finally, through you, Madam Moderator, to the chair of the school committee, could you please let town meeting members know what the vote was for the favorable action on the Carriage House? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair of the school committee, Ms. Mariama Bolognese, could you please provide more information on the vote of the school committee to town meeting, if relevant?
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. The vote by the school committee was 3-2 for favorable action.
Thank you. Further on the question, stage right mic.
Thank you, Madam
Quiet
Moderator.
down, please.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. My name is Karen Conley. I represent Precinct 3, and I actually rise in support of Article 26. There was a huge amount of information dumped on town meeting this afternoon between 1 and 4 o'clock. I did find that unfortunate because it was all very important information. But in all of this information, I think it is easy to get lost in the details and to argue about some small points. I look at this, not small points, to argue about all the details. All these points are big. And I do not mean in any way to imply that the amount of money that we're discussing is insignificant. But I do ask town meeting to look at this from the broader picture of asset and liability. The Sanborn House potentially, the Carriage House could be a huge asset to this community. If town meeting again decides to kick this can down the road and not deal with it, I would suggest we will very soon be asked to bring down the building. It's falling down. We've been talking about this building for a long time in this community. It could potentially be an asset both in terms of providing a permanent home to central office and a beautiful historic building. In terms of liability, I think if we have to add, and I think at the end of the day we would, multiple portables to the Parkhurst site, that's over $2 million we're spending to rent something that is money we're never going to get back. That's money you can kiss goodbye. If we spend that money to renovate a building to be a permanent solution to what we do with central office, I think that's a better use of our money. So I think if we look at this at a 50 or 60,000 foot view instead of over every detail, it's a little bit easier to say yes. The other concern I would raise, or I would just ask you to consider, is many people have talked about this in terms of imperiling our AAA bond rating and free cash. I would refer town meeting back to an earlier presentation from Select Board Member Golubov about how we figure free cash. And I would also say that in the 29 years I have lived in this community, every town meeting for 29 years, I have heard that if we do something, our AAA bond rating is gone, our free cash is gone. And I stand here, and over 29 years, that has never happened. So I actually would urge this body to consider both articles positively. Obviously, we need to rebuild Lynch School. We need to do it as quickly as possible. But I think we need to solve the question of what do we do with central office and what do we do with the Carriage House. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you, Ms. Connolly. Further?
Good evening, Brian Fernalia, Precinct 4. And yes, it is my birthday still. I'm concerned that we have a false choice ahead of us, the preferred option and the backup option. And there, if you look at the bottom on page 39, it talks about the modulars plus Parkhurst option in both cases. And there's a $2.29 million difference in those options. That is saying that we have to keep central office administration in Parkhurst. I don't understand why any scenario has us do that. We could rent space almost anywhere for less than $2.29 million. So my question, Madam Moderator, through you to the proponent, why is there any option here that has central office staying in Parkhurst? It is the most expensive option. So if Article 26 were to fail and Article 27 were to pass, why would we put 16 modulars as opposed to just 8 modulars and spending less than $600,000 to rent space. Thank you, Madam Moderator. Thank you, Town Meeting.
Thank you. To the EFPBC, could you please provide information on why the proposal is, if 26 fails, is to keep central office at Parkhurst, and if other options were evaluated?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Happy birthday again, Brian. All right, I'll do my best to answer this. So the EFPBC is not a taxing authority. The EFPBC works within the guardrails for school projects that are set by the school committee and the MSBA. When we're working with the MSBA, sometimes we don't like it, McCall, on that expansion. So we work with what are considered eligible project expenses. The EFPBC, it's not the EFPBC's job, nor would it ever say to Dr. Hackett, you need to go move central office somewhere. That would really have to come from the school committee. But then, of course, the question is, how would we pay for that? Remember, and Dr. Vernaglia is right when he kind of goes through the cost, but that's not the preferred option. That's that backup option. The preferred option is to follow the master plan. So we had projected, and we shared this with town meeting last fall, the cost to move central office someplace for 2 years. We looked carefully, actually, in Winchester to find space that was suitable. Suitable meaning large enough, accessible, adequate parking, etc. We came up empty. But we didn't stop. We actually did look beyond Winchester. So we found some sites in Burlington, in Woburn, I think in Stoneham, and in Medford. And we reached out to commercial real estate brokers. Our former finance director, who's now the chief business administrator in Burlington, assisted Dr. Hackett with his transition, went back and updated some of that information. And so from folks like CBRE and Cushman & Wakefield and others that folks in real estate might recognize, we were told very clearly we should budget around $33 a foot for Class A office space. That's not Taj Mahal space. That just means it's accessible, it's got adequate parking, and the conditions in good nick. So for about 26 months of rental, and to allow for moving costs, IT, fit up, off-site digital records management, and a whole list of things, added up to a lot of money. We shared with you last fall it would be around $650,000, which just about made me fall out of my chair. But we have a lot of those receipts from the move that central office made to Parkhurst back in 2013, and of course rental rates have gone up. Mr. Mucci makes a really good point about other opportunities. So if Cummings Properties had something that was suitable for us at a discount, as low as $22 a foot, that would be terrific. But remember, we're talking about $7,200 gross leasable. So even if we pocket that delta, we're only saving maybe $140,000, $150,000 over the course of those 2 years. So let's just zoom out for a minute and say whether it would cost the district $650,000 to rent for 2 years, or $500,000 or $400,000, where would that money come from? That's not a capital expense. Renting is a sort of an operating expense, and that would presumably have to come out of the school budget, and that's not in our school budget. Our budget is about supporting our students. So it is a big ask for Article 26, $6 million, but it is, as I hope everybody understands, tied to this understanding we have about that intrinsic value of Parkhurst to generate revenue. And I would also give credit to Mr. Nardone, who's the chair of the EFPBC, who was really crystal clear with the school committee that although the input we've received gives us great confidence that there is interest in Parkhurst as a revenue generator by the fall of 25. If we don't have a use for that building, even to support Morocco swing space, and if we need it for Morocco swing space, it will not be until 2030. And by that point, Parkhurst will have been sitting for 5 years, and we will have repeated the mistake we made between Ambrose and VO. When we were finished with the building at Ambrose, that building sat dormant for 5 years and fell into disrepair. We could have made money. The Bartlett School was a private school. Some of you remember. They rented Parkhurst from 1981 to 1999. There is interest out there. However, Mr. Nardone brings us back to reality that if, in fact, there should be no interest when we're ready to lease Parkhurst and we don't need the building, we would have to consider selling the building. And so from multiple valuation points of view, including our own assessment that you can find on winchester.us, right now that's about a $12.6, $12.8 million parcel, which certainly covers the cost of The Carriage House, and as Mr. Mucci and I think Mr. Betancourt have also previously spoken about, that presents other opportunities. Do you put some of that money towards a new Morocco? Do you put it to our OPEB liability? Many of our teachers contribute to our OPEB liability. So there are lots of options out there when we talk about the disposition of Parkhurst, once we get to that bridge to cross it.
Thank you, Mr. Nixon. Further on the question, Mr. McCabe.
How you doing? Stephen McCabe, Precinct 8, new town meeting member. Thanks for having me. I guess I'm new to this, so I might mess it up, but I have a couple questions for the school committee. When considering these projects, you wonder who is being served by them. The Lynch students and teachers, and then the administrators, the 18 administrators in town. And who are we prioritizing here with these projects? And obviously the Lynch school should come way, way ahead of anything else here. We talked a little bit about, we saw on the slides, one of the options, which is clearly unrealistic, was keeping kids at the Lynch school during the construction. But why not consider keeping the 18 administrators at the Lynch school during the construction? And then just jumping to, if we could, we don't necessarily have to, but looking at some of the options there with the rental space through Cummings Properties, I noted it was 6,500 square feet at 150K. And then one of the other options, which was mentioned again, the going from 8 modular spaces to 16 if the administrators are kept at the Parkhurst School. So tying that together, why do we need 8 classrooms for 18 administrators? Why do we need 6,500 square feet for 18 administrators? And one of the things I found interesting the past few weeks, the basement of the Carriage House has a little over 2,000 square feet. The administrators plan to use that 2,000 square feet to store the paper filings. We are in 2022, and I looked, Waukegan, Illinois, a suburb outside of Chicago, which is bigger than Winchester. It cost them $356,000 to take 6.2 million pieces of paper and digitize them, and they did it within a year. So why have we not looked at that as an option? That's 2,000 square. So if you take, instead of 150 grand a year at 6,500 square feet, if we knock that down to 4,000 square feet, and it actually should be much, much lower than that because it's 2022. We have the option to work at home, and we have other options in town. So I think we should prioritize, let's get Lynch done, let's get Morocco done, and we can work, the administrators can work somewhere else. Thank you.
So there are 3 questions in there. I believe they go to the EFPBC. The first one was, did you look into having admin stay on the Lynch site during construction?
I'll ask Mr. Hay to fill in if I sort of incomplete in my answer. No, there's real value in having everybody off-site. I mean, if you think about it, we have administrators on site at Lynch right now. They're special ed personnel, there are principals, assistant principals, and so forth. The appeal to a contractor is to have everybody off the site. The contractor wants to own that site, have full control of that site, period. To the question about, Madam Moderator, I guess I'm remembering the last question more clearly.
There's the second question was 8 classrooms for 18 admins?
I'm not sure I'm following the question. I might ask it to be repeated.
How many, the member noted that there are 8 classrooms associated for 18 administrators at Parkhurst. Why is 8 needed, and can't it be reduced?
So I guess I'm not following the question. What I would tell you is the administrators we have today are using the full first floor of what is a 30,000 square foot building. The proposal for the Carriage House, and this does tie back to the third question, is to put them in it's around 7,300 square feet. The NET program, and TAPE is very experienced in this, they created a net space program. So that actually calculates the spaces you need for all the individuals that work at central office. They don't all need 300 square foot offices, although the superintendent would be proposed to have one of the largest offices in the Carriage House. Given his role, it would be a downsize for him as well. Dr. Hackett has about 960 feet at Parkhurst because he's in a former classroom. That gets cut sharply. but many of his staff actually are in small shared work areas in an open space, so it's actually a very efficient plan. There is no way to accommodate central office in 4,000 square feet. The net program is around 4,400. That literally just accounts for the space we have from face of wall to face of wall. So when architects talk about net program, that doesn't account for the thickness of a partition, a passageway, doesn't account for walkways in an auditorium, and so forth. So you typically would use like a 1.5 multiplier. That's certainly the way the MSBA works, and that's sort of industry standard for that space. And Madam Moderator, if I may just refer back to Ms. Bodie's comment, I think there may have been a question in there about the MSBA.
The question from Ms. Bodie, although it wasn't stated as a question, was for debt override and include it with Lynch.
So I think I heard she was specifically referring to the Carriage House. Yes, might be included as a debt exclusion override. I'm really glad she raises this. So I want to be clear with town meeting. This concept goes back really over 2 years. When we applied with the statement of interest to the MSBA, they were curious what we might be doing for swing space. And we said, well, we typically use Parkhurst. We've used it before, but it's full right now with central office. But we have this master plan that says maybe the Carriage House. So if that should come to pass, we might be able to get central office out of Parkhurst and use it. They told us at the time that we were happy to pursue that, but they made clear that the Carriage House would be considered an ineligible expense. Even though Ms. Bodie's correct, you can make the case it's swing space because you're sort of moving central office from one place to another to make room for kids. I'm appreciative of the sentiment I'm hearing tonight from Ms. Bodie and other boards about sort of generally supporting the project, but a hopefulness that there would be some other way to pay for it. I must say tonight, and I don't know if our Beacon Hill delegation is here, as they are sometimes, but they do work with us with the MSBA. And so I would certainly be willing, perhaps with Dr. Hackett, Mr. Nardone, and the architect, to go back and appeal to the MSBA should this not pass town meeting tonight with Article 26, and make the case that the work has been done and it is virtually shovel-ready, and make the case how it supports the project, to see if they would reconsider. But we should be clear that we have been told that it is not eligible. And that's really kind of why we're here tonight with Article 26.
Thank you. And the third question is to remove the storage space of all of the paper documents. Have you looked into digitalizing to reduce that cost?
Thank you. So two-part answer to that. So in fact, we are reducing sharply the amount of file storage that we currently have today at Parkhurst in this consolidated plan at Carriage House. There's a tremendous number of special ed records, and I'm happy to defer, Madam Moderator, to Dr. Hackett on this, but absolutely, we live in a digital world. The school committee, the administration has gravitated to some digital platforms. I wonder if I could let Dr. Hackett just speak to some space we need for records in the building.
Dr. Hackett, could you please provide town meeting information on the storage requirements for non-digitalized paper documents?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Through you, not really to the square foot. What I can tell you is what Mr. Nixon stated when I first got here in the summer. One of the things we've been doing since is culling through decades worth of files. Report cards that go back to 1920 that are still kept in files. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done just to figure out what even would be digitized, but there are absolutely records that have to be kept in paper form through the school department, and some of those are, as Mr. Nixon alluded to, related to special education records. So I don't have the square footage need. My apologies.
But you're working on it.
So hard.
Thank you. Further on the question, Ms. Miller?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Joan Miller, Precinct 6, and to town meeting members, through you to town meeting members, I would urge town meeting members to vote no on Article 26, and I didn't want to repeat the rationale for that. I think we had excellent presentations from Select Board, FinCom, Capital Planning Committee as to why this doesn't make sense, but I just feel like people might have forgotten after hearing a lot of other things. But basically, I won't repeat them, but cost, risk to our financial state, the timeline that's so tight that it doesn't seem feasible, and the harm to the Ambrose students and community. And I guess what I hear along with this is really an emotional plea to rebuild and restore the Carriage House, and I can understand that. I like old stuff. And I would just propose, unrelated to what we're voting on, but maybe the select board could put together a committee, if Article 6 goes down, which I hope it does, the select board could put together a committee to fundraise, use philanthropy to fundraise to renovate and restore the Carriage House. Maybe think about using it for something different, like meeting space, which had been proposed in the past. $6 million is something our town residents, there are people that could help do that. I would be happy to serve on such a committee. I don't have $6 million, but I do enjoy fundraising. So it's just sort of another idea. And maybe we could do it. We could do the construction if we get the funding, not during the school year and not disrupt Ambrose. Just another thought.
Further on the question?
Dorothy Simboli, Precinct 6. Madam Moderator, through you to the EFPBC, what was the result of the 2013 RFP that was put out requesting other uses of the Carriage House, and why were those responses never acted upon? And then the other question is for the Select Board, actually, through you, Madam Moderator. Has the town ever considered acquiring the Carriage House from the EFPBC?
Thank you. First question to the EFPBC. Could you please provide town meeting the results of the 2013 RFP and why it was not acted upon?
Thank you for the question. So it's actually a question best directed to the school committee, but I'm wearing two hats tonight, so I can tell you it was actually not an RFP. Around 2012 or 2013, the school committee created a subcommittee called the Carriage House Disposition Subcommittee. And the purpose of that committee was to try to figure out, at a time when the school committee was pondering, do we get rid of the Carriage House or not? It seems like it has value for administration. But we're not ready to act on that because we've just had our hands full with VO and some other priorities. There was no immediate funding sort of before us. And of course, I think by that point, central office, we had a plan, was going to move into Parkhurst. So the school committee wanted to understand what interest is there in Carriage House. Remember, a use has to be compliant with zoning. So there are some uses that are not permitted. So we actually put out a non-binding request for, I think, non-binding statements of interest. We got a few statements. WinCam was interested in the building. The Woburn Social Preschool as well was interested in, which Brian remembers. And we also had some interest expressed by the Winchester Historical Society. Saying that slowly, that's different than the Historical Commission. The Historical Society is home at the Sanborn House, where they've sort of been painstakingly restoring it. So the school committee kind of reviewed those proposals. I know there was concern about the preschool with respect to a lot of traffic, and the issue with WinCam really had a lot to do with the schedule on the high school. WinCam was really looking to do something very, very quickly, and I think the schedule would not sort of accommodate that. And then with respect to the Historical Society, I think the concern there was maybe a lack of clarity about kind of how the financial plan would kind of come together to do the work. But we didn't sort of pass judgment negatively on any of them. We were just more interested in what the opportunities might be. At the end of the day, the school committee said, we still think we really may need this for administration. We're going to hang on to it. So we said, thank you. Was that the last?
The second question was actually that I would like you to answer is that, and it goes actually to the school committee, the Carriage House belongs to the school committee, not to the select board. And why is the school committee holding on to the property? And have you thought about releasing it and doing alternative options with the Carriage House?
So I will defer to certainly my colleague who's the chair for any present day thinking. I can tell you historically, the school committee of years past has simply opted not to do that because once we access the property, it's gone for good. And as you sort of reflect in the master plan, if there is some interest in using it for administration purposes, we'd want to hang on to it for that purpose.
Did you want to contribute at all to that as a chair?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Mr. Nixon is correct that, yes, the school committee had held onto the property, or it had held onto the property to consider it for future use as per the master plan.
Further on the question, Ms. Savage. All right, at this time, a member of town meeting has asked to move the question for town meeting members. What that means is they ask that we end debate, comments and questions, and that we immediately stop and go to vote. So to do this, we stop debate, we go to vote to decide if we want to end debate or continue, and we need a second. All right, there's a second. If you give us a moment, town meeting members who are in the auditorium, please come join us. We will be voting to move the vote on Article 26, and that is to end debate. The vote is to end debate. We're going to keep it open for a little bit because we need to let the members outside come join us as they were not ready for it. The motion before town meeting is to end the debate of Article 26, also known as moving the vote. A 2/3 vote is required to pass. If you hit green, it means you would like the debate to end and to go immediately to vote on Article 26. If you hit the red button, which is the no, you would like to continue the debate and continue discussing Article 26. For those who are here for the vote, please cast and make sure you've got the little box that says okay. With 154 members voting, 94 in the affirmative, 60 in a negative, 103 required to pass, the motion fails and the discussion continues. Further on the question, Ms. Savage.
Yes, that's correct.
2/3 vote is required. It did not pass. Further on the question, we had 2 members in line.
Yeah.
You may return. It required 103 to pass. It did not get it.
Thank you, town meeting. Yeah, I think with a few people left to speak, I think it's respectful to let people ask their questions. I have struggled with this one. I've attended all the info sessions. I've asked a lot of questions. I attended precinct conversations, and I'm really struggling with this vote. So I appreciate the opportunity to ask a couple more questions that I do think we need to consider before we do take this vote. I have 3 questions. I think it's very important that we, as a town, do identify a permanent space for school administration. And I would hope town meeting agrees with that for the sake of employee morale, the leadership of our schools, which is should be the pride of our community. To not value the space we provide them is not appropriate, in my opinion. So, but I do think a lot of good questions have been raised about this, and that the number of things have changed since the master plan identified this as a location. So I think it's right that we're asking questions about that. I do want to understand the importance of freeing up Parkhurst to become a revenue source. It's a huge asset that sits idle and could be a very important revenue source that we desperately need in the town. So I don't think we've asked enough questions about that, how hard we studied that, what kind of analysis was done on the real estate value of renting that, and could we have done more to identify that? I think it seems like it was a fairly informal analysis that was done on that. So I would like to understand if you did a net present value on that project and assumed that the Parkhurst becomes a revenue source for the town, doesn't that change the cash flows of this project pretty significantly? So maybe FinCom can opine on whether they thought about that aspect of this proposal. And then, and maybe the select board also. The question that Ms. Bodie raised about potentially funding source of this project is very important. I think dipping into free cash, I think we all agree that that's problematic. And identifying a different revenue source would make sense. If we felt better about future cash flows on rental of Parkhurst, I think we'd all feel better. But also the possibility of bundling the cost of this project into the override, whether or not MSBA is funding it, that's still an option, I think. I understand that. So that's a question I have for, I guess, the select board. Would that be a possibility, even if MSBA is not reimbursing this project, for the funding of this to go into the override proposal for the Lynch? I guess one question for EFPBC, what is the level of confidence around the $6 million? Initially, I thought 2, and I still do have questions about cost overruns and supply chains and the rest. But I have started to think about this project a little differently. It's a 7,000 square foot building. I've seen houses in Winchester around that size get renovated, and I don't think they've spent $6 million on that. So I think we should think hard about that. And how confident are we on the $6 million? Is it possible we'd be a $10 million project? And then I guess maybe there's one last question. So that's what you see. One last question is the vote of the school committee was 3-2. Maybe we should hear from the 2, the minority point of view, on what would they do if 26 fails. Where could we put admin? Are there other options we should be thinking about?
Thank you. So there are multiple questions to multiple entities, so we'll take them one at a time. Please be concise in your answers, as we're getting late at the hour and we need to get through all of our agendas. So next, the first question is, if we free Parkhurst for the rental, what is the analysis that has been done? Can you do a brief overview of that? The question was directed to the Select Board and FinCom. I am unclear if there was an analysis done on your part. If so, please provide us that information.
I'm sorry, Madam Moderator, could you repeat that question?
Did you do an analysis on the rental income from Parkhurst if it's rented out in your decision?
I think that analysis is a 2-part analysis. The first part is what capital improvements need to be done to Parkhurst, and we're still trying to get a clear answer on that. We know the boiler is aging, the roof is aging. At one point, the building had been mothballed. So in order to understand what value renting this property would get us, we need to understand what we have to invest in it. If anyone's a landlord here, they know that it's not just collecting the rents. It's dealing with the tenants. It's dealing with the infrastructure. It's dealing with the capital investments in the property to keep them running. And when you deal with a 30,000 square foot school, those expenses get very costly. So in order to properly vet that, we would need to have this building completely analyzed and see what exactly the nature of those capital repairs are. We've had Pete Lawson take a look at them, and he's got a report that's gone out. But again, that's just preliminary in nature. There's significant repairs that we believe need to be made to this.
Thank you for the second question. And while you're up there, I'm going to give it to the Select Board. Would you be willing to bundle with the override, even if the MSB is not part of it, the cost of the Sanborn Carriage House for the administration offices?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I think the point of my presentation is there are a lot of options to consider, and certainly I had in my presentation, including this in the debt exclusion override would be certainly something we would consider. They were talked about accessing the building back to the town, back to the select board. That hasn't been an option, but certainly if the school committee did that, it could free up a public-private partnership to take place, which would also make a building project like this more affordable. So there's plenty of options out there, and it's more affordable because we have to do public projects at prevailing wage. If it's a private partnership that would take it over and rent it out like they did at Sanborn, then certainly that would make this cost a lot less. And that's to your point why houses are cheaper than our building projects. So there are a lot of options to explore, and the debt exclusion override is certainly one of them.
Thank you. FinCom, did you want to make a comment about the analysis on the rental income?
We did, Madam Moderator.
Please proceed.
So we had a few comments to Ms. Savage's question about the net present value. FinCom has not taken that upon ourselves, but we see the need for a real estate consultant or some expert in this area. Everything we've seen so far is hypothetical, and it would be great if it panned out, but it's a risk. Also, we noted there's lots of open rental space right now that's going unused. And we also note that the current rental for the Mystic first floor is about $30,000 a year. So that's a bit of a mismatch. And finally, just furthering on what Mr. Mucci said about the work required at Parkhurst. So we have been told by DPW there's roof work that's needed. There's plumbing work that's needed. There's a boiler replacement needed. So that's significant. Also more costs that haven't been considered. Thank you.
Thank you. To the EFPBC, can you provide answers on the confidence in that $6 million number and also the analysis that you did on the rental income from the property?
Okay, thank you for the question. So, and I appreciate it because it reminds me we should clarify something from John Dobbins and his question. Apologies if we were unclear in presenting this. So we're not relying on an estimate from last summer. The estimate was updated in March based on all the additional work that Fall Town Meeting funded. We had no engineering drawings when we came to Fall Town Meeting. We just had paragraphs from engineers describing how the systems would work. So many more drawings were created. We did an updated estimate, and that's the basis of the $6 million. I'm not a professional cost estimator. PM&C, Peter Bradley owns the firm. He's familiar with Winchester, worked on the VO project and a couple of others, deep into education space and renovation projects. Trustworthy firm, so I suppose that's all I can say about that. With respect to the question about rental, once again, we're sort of looking at a couple of different things here. So the SEAM Collaborative, which is a public entity of which Winchester is a part, is beginning to look for space to suit their current needs and potential future additional needs as well. And as a part of their board meeting, I think in March, they were sharing information from their real estate consultants advising them that the market is between $20 and $30 a foot. Being a public entity, we expect they would be looking somewhere at the bottom of that range. And as recently as 2 weeks ago, we're hearing from firms like Jones Lang LaSalle, who represent private clients in this market, that they're looking at upper 20s, low 30s. So it sort of depends upon who you pluck out of the pond. The Bartlett School, of course, was a private entity. And Madam Moderator, just to clarify again on rental and the chair from FinCom's comment about Mystic, for years, all the 13 years I've been on the school committee, when the lease has been renegotiated with Kids Corner at the Mystic School, management has told the school committee we need not be concerned with the finances. So the school committee reviews things like operating hours, the procedure to modify the building, permitted uses, escape clauses if we need the building, but never the money. So the contract, which is going into its 5th year effective July 1st, is signed by the school committee. I think it actually has my name on it from 4 years ago. But the dollars are actually an attachment to the contract. And I do think, given what you heard tonight about Chapter 40, Section 3, you'll find the school committee taking a greater interest in what it is we're seeking to get from our buildings.
Thank you. Did members of the school committee who were part of the minority vote want to provide their input on what the plan is with administration?
So I will say that it's not the common practice of the school committee to give a minority report. We respect the decision that the committee has made, What I can tell you is what has been said in public meetings, which is that I can only speak for myself because Mr. Brady isn't here this evening, that we have many of the same questions that have been asked here this evening, and that we have not been brought alternative options other than the Carriage House, as this is an EFPBC, not a school committee article. Any options that you have heard tonight have been presented before the EFPBC.
Is it a comment or a quick question? Because there's people.
Just like to make one final comment. I think everybody who's been involved in this, I think every board is working with the intent to serve the town. This is a hard decision, and I don't think this is necessarily the end of the discussion.
Thank you. Further on the question?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Timothy Matthews, Precinct 1. I have a bunch of questions, and I'll try to sort of indicate where they might go, and if others feel they're more appropriate to chime in, that'd be great. So first of all, being in Precinct 1, I'm actually very concerned about the Morocco Project, which is something we haven't really spoken a lot about tonight, except in some of the comments that have come up. When we moved to Winchester in 2018, there was a lot of discussion that it was going to be happening in fairly short order after the Lynch Project, and now I'm hearing a variety of things, including that it might be postponed for a much longer period of time, that it might be constructed on Leonard Field, that it might be renovated in place. And I'd love to hear from whoever, I don't know if it's EFPBC or the school committee, what the current plans are with the Morocco Project and whether that has been considered as part of a sort of larger strategic planning process when we're considering this article. The second thing I wanted to bring up is that I actually, like Ms. Savage, did attend many of the sessions and review a lot of the materials available on this. And one of the things I came across was the March 2020 strategic plan that the planning board put in place. And at the time, under that plan, they actually had the language for what was labeled strategy D3.2 was actually talking about the possibility of constructing central administration at the Carriage House for a cost of $3 million. And so I'd love, I don't know if it's the planning board or other folks like the EFPBC that would be appropriate to answer, but given the fact that basically just since March of 2020, it seems like the cost has doubled in terms of what was documented. Love a little bit of more information on why that is. And then another question that would be, I guess, for the select board possibly is who actually decides what to do moving forward with the Carriage House and central administration if Article 26 fails. And then my last question, I believe, is about alternatives for admin space. So the first part of it would be whether Lynch, as it currently stands, has been considered seriously as a potential admin space, and if so, whether that was viewed to be undesirable or completely not feasible. And then I know other folks have brought up the question of the Mystic School and the space that may be unutilized during the day from Kids Corner. Has that been considered seriously, and are there concerns that would completely preclude that as a possible place for central administration, at least in the short term? Like Ms. Savage, I'm really struggling with this, and I hope some of these questions might help get me closer. Thank you.
Thank you. The first question regarding Morocco is a little bit outside of the article before us. However, to the school committee, can you just give a brief timeline of Morocco, of where it stands, as it does impact where, if you use Parkhurst, admin goes?
Thank you very much. And so school committee had voted to prioritize the Lynch project first, and then Morocco we are looking at more towards 2028, and that is why last year town meeting had supported the life extension plan for the Morocco school, which supports the replacement of the boiler system, the electrical system, and the roofs.
Thank you. Further on that question, if the Carriage House fails, what is the school committee's plan with the Carriage House as it's in your possession?
then that will be a discussion for a future school committee meeting.
And then the final question that was in there, in my memory, is has the Mystic Schools unutilized space been considered for admin? I believe that should go to the EFPBC. Did you analyze the unused space at Mystic for admin?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. So, short answer is no, that was not considered. I think the other question was about Lynch. Was Lynch seriously considered? That was seriously considered. I think I had a few slides of that in the presentation. The MSBA considers that only on a case-by-case basis, never reimbursable, and in some instances they actually reject it. The other concern we had was simply on timeline and how that would impact the design of the project. And Madam Moderator, Mr. Matthews also had that question about cost. Referencing a planning board document, it had once been $3 million. So I can clarify that the construction cost of the Carriage House is estimated at $4 million. That's construction cost. The project cost is $6 million. There's about $630,000 in construction cost in this project for that parking lot that Charlie showed you earlier, the driveway, the site improvements, retaining wall, and so forth. So some significant site work. Things like the hazardous materials abatement that Ms. DeLeo mentioned, that's in there, that's expensive as well, and a number of soft costs that sort of escalate that. So there's no doubt back in 2017 when we were looking at the Carriage House, many of us were saying $3 million construction cost. That has clearly escalated to around $4 million today. But we just got to be clear we're talking apples to apples between construction cost and project cost.
Thank you. Further on the question, Mr. Johnson. This time I'm going to have Dr. Miller speak, and thereafter we're going to go to vote.
Good evening again, Brian. Forget it. I rise tonight as a town meeting member from Precinct 6. I ask town meeting to vote unfavorable action on Article 26, the Carriage House reconstruction, simply because now is not the time. Now is not the time to renovate and build a new administration building for our school district. It is not in the best interest of Winchester right now to build this building or reconstruct this building. We have many more important projects over the next 3 to 5 years that we will have to consider at town meetings. To me, the most important issue tonight is to build the Lynch School, to move all the children to the Parkhurst School, preferably inside the building, and in a smaller and in less than 18 modulars or 16 modulars. You know, we got a bond rating that we're very fortunate to have. We've got to maintain that. And you might look the other way, you might smicker, this is my project or not, but we've done a great job in the town, one of 13 towns in the state that have maintained this through good times and bad times. We must maintain the bond rating. And, you know, we're going to have to keep our operating reserves up, as the Select Board and the Finance Committee has already indicated. We do use free cash for ongoing expenses in a limited way, and we do use it for one-time expenses. Unfortunately, the Carriage House is not the one-time expense we can use our surplus funds on. The school administration can survive without a new location for the next several years. The Carriage House is just going to have to wait. We as a town work together. We all want what is in the best interest of our community. Right now, town staff, town meeting, and everybody else will work with the school administration to find temporary quarters once again for the administration. We've got to get them out of the Parkhurst. There's no discussion, there's not much debate about that. You know, we've had the town hall. Town hall staff has worked in the auditorium. They had recently done it up until last year, I believe. I think there's about 14 people in town hall. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 public meeting rooms available in the town hall. We could use they could use. No, I think the word "we" is better. There is surplus space within the school districts. You know, technology, spend some time at the high school, maybe they spend a lot more time. I have locations either throughout Winchester or abutting communities where we can rent space. Let's look into it. We've got to do this as a town. We've got to provide for our children, which is our most important asset. For these reasons, now is not the time to build a new school at the Carriage House. The time will come, however, for their new administration building.
Thank you very much. Dr. Miller, do you have more to add?
Just very quickly, one of the questions was, has EFPBC looked at Mystic School? And on the April 4th meeting of EFPBC, we did spend half an hour on Mystic School. And at the end of that discussion about Mystic School, there's 7,000 square feet of space in the first floor of Mystic School. At the end of that, we were advised that EFPBC does not have an instruction from the school committee to investigate other alternatives other than the Carriage House. So I think the correct answer to that is that we have not looked at other alternatives. I'm FinCom's liaison member to EFPBC. Other alternatives have not been looked at. And I just want to finish very quickly with the March 7th, 2022 EFPBC minutes. It was moved and seconded on a motion made by Mr. Nixon, seconded by Mr. Miller, to have Ms. White, Meg White, take the proposed warrant article language offered prior to the meeting and use it for the first article, that's 26. And a second article would be prepared for Parkhurst as a standalone article. That is Article 27. This was unanimously adopted by EFPBC. Article 27 stands on its own. It focuses on Lynch and gets Parkhurst ready. That's the ball that I think, as a town meeting member, that we should remain focused on. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. Town meeting members who are out in the auditorium, please join us. We are going to vote on Article 26. At this time, requires a 2/3 vote required to pass, and we are voting to appropriate funds for Sanborn Carriage House renovations for the Winchester Public Schools Administration and central offices. We are going to get it up and working. Give me one moment. Green light is on. If you hit green, it means that you are in favor of appropriating the funds. If you vote red, which is no, you are not in favor. This time, please cast your votes. Look for the little okay. I believe we are all ready. And close the vote. The 159 members voting of town meeting, 106 required to pass. There are 25 in the affirmative, 134 in the negative, and the negative has it. Moving on to Article 27, I would like town meeting members to pay attention to the time. We need to get through our entire agenda this evening. 27, all the boards and committees offered their recommendations on this. And so at this time, I think it'd be best we take a break and go right into voting on Article 27, which we discussed heavily as part of 26. So we're going to take a 10-minute break. Also, as part of that, you want to keep going? All right, let's keep going. I'm fine with that. No break for you. Yep. Can you please scroll the vote? All right, while we do that, we're going to move on to Article 27. 2/3 vote is required. It is moved and seconded that $169,750 is appropriated to pay for design and engineering services for the development of plans and specifications to make improvements and alterations to the Parkhurst School in preparation for its use as temporary educational swing space to accommodate the development of the Lynch Elementary School project, and for the payment of all costs incidental and related thereto, that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with approval of the select board, is authorized to borrow said amount under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 7, Subsection 7, or under any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the town, therefore, that the Educational Facilities Planning and Building Committee shall be authorized to have oversight of the project, and that in accordance with Section 4-2 of the Town of Winchester Home Rule Charter, the town manager shall have the authority to enter into contracts and approve payments with respect to the project. Essentially, this is to appropriate funds for Parkhurst School alterations. I have asked the Education Facilities Planning Board and Committee to give you a one-liner essentially on what Article 27 does in lieu of how you voted on Article 26. The EFBBC representative, Mr. Nixon.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. So just to clarify, since 26 has failed, we still do need 27 to make provisions for the kids in terms of temporary swing space. There will be investments made in Parkhurst for some of the things Mr. Mucci mentioned. Those will actually be included in the project funding agreement and the debt exclusion override in the fall. So 27 is time sensitive. It's really focused only on modular classroom buildings and time-critical site utility prep work that's necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. We have heard the recommendations from any of the boards and committees at this time. If any town meeting member had any questions, please rise. Otherwise, we're going to the vote. Yes, Mr. Johnson. If you'd like to make a motion to amend, please state your amendment.
I'd like to make a motion to amend the number of portable classrooms to 10. That would allow the students to be inside the building. They said they needed 8. 10 would give them a little wiggle room.
Mr. Johnson, the motion is a dollar amount, not the quantity.
Could I have an estimated amount on the cost of each portable classroom, or I'll amend it to $2?
Mr. Johnson, this is just for design and engineering, so the cost for those will actually be in the debt exclusion in January. So I'm going to call it out of order. Any other comments or questions? Town meeting members? Let's go to the vote. Town meeting members who are outside, please come join us. We are going to vote on Article 27. A 2/3 vote is required. As this is borrowing, I am going to actually have you use your voters clickers. This is to appropriate funds for Parkhurst School alterations. The green is in favor, the red is not. This is for design and engineering. – 159 members voting, with 157 in the affirmative, 2 in the negative, 105 required to pass, and the motion is adopted. Moving on, we are going to go to Article 28. It is moved and seconded that the town appropriate $75,000 from free cash for preliminary engineering services for traffic improvements associated with the Lynch Elementary School project and in the surrounding neighborhoods. This requires a majority vote, and on behalf of the Select Board as a proponent is Mr. Mucci. Town meeting members, as a reminder, we need to keep our quorum, or you will hinder the business before us from succeeding. Go ahead, Mr. Mucci. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. So Article 28 is funding of a Lynch traffic study sponsored by the Select Board. For anybody who has been a Lynch parent or lives in the neighborhood can attest to the traffic you see outside a pickup. And here, in case you haven't been down there, is a visual. This is just an everyday occurrence at pickup. As you can see, cars are going in all different directions, some frontwards, some sideways. So we need to address this, especially we owe it to the neighbors given this is a new building in their neighborhood. In 2018, the Select Board voted a policy on traffic safety studies for school expansion projects. Basically states that all major school expansion projects should include a traffic safety study, which will evaluate the volume and travel patterns of pedestrian, bikes, and vehicular traffic to and from and in the vicinity of the project, analyze the capacity, performance, and safety of roadways and bike and pedestrian infrastructure. So why a traffic study now? Well, it will help solve a problem. By completing a traffic study prior to project funding, it allows the town to include funding for any mitigation measures in the project. We learned this lesson from VO. At the VO project, we had extra money available at the end of the project that could have gone to traffic mitigation measures if we had a traffic study done. It's also, as I mentioned, fair to the neighbors on both sides of this project. What will a traffic study do? Well, the $75,000 traffic study will be performed by Tool Engineering, which is our traffic engineering firm that we use in this town. We will evaluate the vehicle, pedestrian, and bike movements, infrastructure, and potential improvements to support safety enhancement and network connectivity in the neighborhood on both sides of the school. The areas of the study include the Pond Street corridor, Middlesex Street, Sylvester Avenue, Main Street, and Canal Street. The final product would be a series of findings and proposed improvements, including conceptual design, recommendations, and planning level cost estimates. Additional funding would be required for final design and construction of future improvements, which we could do with the project funding. We hope you will join the Select Board in voting yes on Article 28.
Thank you. Recommendation from the School Committee. Chair, Ms. Mariama Bolognese.
The school committee voted favorable action on this.
Thank you. Recommendation from FinCom. Dr. Blackwell.
FinCom voted unanimously in support of Article 28.
Are there any other boards or committees that had recommendations for town meeting's consideration? Seeing no one rise, town meeting members, if you have any questions or comments on this article, please come to the microphones. Ms. Court.
Good evening, Pamela Court, Precinct 5. I have a question just about the scope of this. I know that it was mentioned in, I don't remember exactly which forum, public hearing or a meeting, where people were asking about the scope of the study. And it includes the Pond Street corridor and Canal Street and Middlesex, but it doesn't really include, it doesn't specifically say Swanton Street. So my question is the Swanton Main Street intersection something that's going to be considered? If it is going to be considered, is there any way to do that in a way that also takes into account the River Street project coming online? And if we have to add investigating that particular intersection, does it change the cost of this?
Thank you. To the Select Board Chair, can you provide town meeting information about the scope of the traffic study, and does it include Swanton and Main Street intersection? And if not, to include it will increase the cost.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Thank you, Ms. Court, for your question. It does include the Main Street, Swanton Street intersection. That was one area that we understand is a high traveled area by kids that go to Lynch, so that certainly is included in the project.
Thank you. Further on the question?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Heidi Rutstein DeLeo, Precinct 5. I have a question about part of the study. Does it involve taking a look at why more students aren't using the bus?
To the Select Board Chair, could you provide town meeting members if the study includes a look at bus usage and walking?
It certainly includes walking and bike use. I don't believe it. I don't know if it includes why students are not inclined to take the bus.
Did the school committee have more information?
Just an EFPBC point of view, the bridge on the Horn Pond Brook side that I think was in Mr. Mucci's video is not a very pedestrian-friendly bridge. There's a small walkway there, but it's not separated from the roadway. So the EFPBC actually in the proposal that the MSBA just approved includes consideration for a pedestrian bridge some distance from that road, almost in the woods, so we can separate pedestrians from cars. And that was specifically so that some kids may feel more comfortable walking to and from on that side of school. So that'll be a part of the design element that we could certainly share with Tool.
Thank you for that information. Seeing no other town meeting members rise, I feel that you are ready for the vote. I'm going to do a voice vote as this is a majority vote required. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it and the motion passes. Moving on to our personnel article, Article 29. This has multiple motions to it. We should be able to move fairly quick through it, I anticipate. On behalf of the Personnel Board, our closer, Mr. Scheinitz. Although we do have two articles afterwards, but they fly.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Again, the closing act. All right, there are 10 articles, 10 motions in the Personnel Board article this year. Most of them are paired articles. Motion 1 and Motion 10 are not. So Motion 1 will cover a salary scale change for the Recreation Department. Motion 2 covers a set of changes within the town, within town employment, and 3 covers the expense of those, covers those expenses. 4 is will be a stipend for the Fair Housing Director. 5 covers the cost. We'll get in details. I'll have details on these. 6 is the only contract that we are dealing with in this session at town meeting. Sorry, got ahead of myself. 6 is a salary, is a cost of living increase for the non-union salary members of the town, and 7 covers the cost of that. 8 is the only contract that we are going to vote on in this session, and 9 covers the cost of that, and 10 will be an appropriation to the unallocated wage account to deal with contracts that are not yet settled. So, Motion 1 reorganizes the salary scale in the Recreation Department. It eliminates a number of positions that were below the present minimum wage, creates a bunch of steps in there for at minimum wage. It also creates a set of ladder pay grades for certain positions that are above the minimum wage, and that will allow us to hire in people who we have been unable to hire because the rates that we've been paying for those positions in the past have been too low to pay directly. And instead of being able to pay them directly, to hire them indirectly, we've had to bring them in as contractors. And in essence, they've been much more expensive than they would be paying direct since they have to pay their own benefits. So overall, this does increase the amount of salary that we're paying in the Recreation Department, but it tends to reduce the amount we're paying in a number of different areas. There is no associated addition of money for this because it's all paid for out of recreation fees. So that's motion one. Motion two is a bit of, we create first the position of archivist. There is a position of archivist right now, but it's a contract position. This moves it into a sub-20-hour internal position, so it is paid directly on salary rather than as a contract. The next two bullets cover a move of the activity of dealing with benefits coordination out of the comptroller's office, where it has been for a number of years, and into the office of the HR department. So we're taking a position. Let me see, now I need my glasses. All right, we're taking a professional technical position. Payroll benefits, which is professional technical 14, and we're creating a payroll manager of PT 13. So we're moving the benefits coordination from that position, and then in the HR department, we're taking the HR coordinator and we're combining that with benefits coordination. So it's going from a PT 11 to a PT 13. Motion 3 pays for that. It's so there's $7,300 that will go into the HR department's budget, and there's $20,500 that goes into the archival center, which is in the clerk's department. Most of the $20,000 is paid for by moving. Let's see, raise. Okay, so. We are raising $1,000 in the tax levy and combining that from $19,500 that will be transferred from I guess, is it transfer? Well, I'm sorry, I should look this up, but it's moving into the personnel budget out of other places in the archival budget. Okay. So motion 4, we have a fair housing director. I'm not sure that that's known. That was new to me. Right now, that's a stipend position, so this is somebody who works in the town manager's office, and they are paid a stipend of $2,994 for their activities as fair housing director. This increases their payment from that to $6,000. This is an acknowledgement of the increased activity of this role. Again, that money is raised out of the tax levy, and that number is $3,006 that goes into the town manager's personal services budget. Okay, so motion 6. Motion 6 is this is the yearly cost of living increase to the non-union compensation schedules of 2 through 6. It's across the board increase of 2.5%. It's effective in recreation in June 1st. And it's effective on the rest of the areas in the budget, starting at the beginning of the fiscal year on July 1st. Motion 7 is the expenses. It was covering the expenses of that increase, so it's a total of $242,645. $199,765 of which is raised and appropriated out of the budget. $9,275 comes out of retained earnings of the Water and Sewer Department, and $33,605 comes out of retained earnings in the recreation budget. Motion 8 is the police superior officer's contract signature. So this is one of the 2 contracts that the police have, and again, this is the only settled contract in this round. The COLAs, which I'll show the result of, are shown on the slide. So FY23, there's a 2% increase. Then over FY23, in FY24, there's a 2.75, And again, in FY25, there's a 2.75% increase over FY24. Vacations are codified with 3 weeks of vacation available after 5 years of service, 4 weeks of vacation after 10 years of service, and 5 weeks after 15 years of service. With the advent of the Juneteenth holiday as a federal and state holiday, that is now added to the contract. And then finally, there's a change in the buyback of sick leave upon retirement. That is now limited. The limit for the max of that has changed from $16,500 worth of sick time being purchased back, and that's been raised to $22,000. Okay, so this is the overall expense. Okay, it's not as bad as I thought it was. All right, sorry for the small font. As you can see, what we have shown here is the amount of money in year over year in the, I don't even know, it's 2 different colors. It's pink on mine, it's yellow on yours. So it's so the base increase is about 30,000, 32,000 a year for the first 2 years. It's a little bit more in the out year, and as you can see, in compounding, that's 2% for first year, because obviously just 1 year, 4.7, compounded for the second year, 7.6 for the final year, for an overall increase from the beginning to the end of the cost of this increase of about 14%. So motion 9 is the appropriation to cover that. This is only in FY23. The appropriation to cover this will be in the standard budget with each year succeeding this. So we will raise $43,503 to cover this contract change, and that will go into the police department's personal service budget. And then finally, there are a number of contracts which have not been settled. They will presumably, once they are settled, have an effect on the FY23 budget, since all the contracts will come to an end at the end of FY22. All the contracts that aren't settled will be working. All the people in contracts that aren't settled will be working without a contract at that point, and therefore, as these things tend to go, the retroactive contract will have expenses in this budget. So motion 10 allocates $360,426 to the unallocated wage budget as an estimate of what the town assumes it'll cost to cover those contracts.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schmitz. Further on the question, do we have a recommendation from the Select Board?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. On Article 29, motions 1 through 10, the Select Board voted favorable action.
Thank you. Recommendation from FinCom. Chair Dr. Blackwell.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. The Finance Committee voted favorable action on motions 1 through 10. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other recommendations from boards or committees? Seeing no one rise, town meeting members, do you have any questions or comments on motions 1 through 10? Thereafter, I will read each one and we will vote. Mr. Nixon.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Through you to Mr. Chimetz. Thank you for all the detail you bring every year. Question on, I believe it was motion 8, Madam Moderator. The detail on the COLAs was really clear. Mr. Chimetz presented some information on vacation time by years of service, 5, 10, 15. Could you just clarify for us, is that a change based on what was in the previous contract? Is this a significant increase in vacation time? And if so, does that have any monetized impact on staffing for folks who are not at work because they're on vacation?
Are you referencing motion number 8, Mr. Nixon, the Police Superior Officers Union Wage? To Mr. Schmitz, could you provide information on vacation regarding the Police Superior Officers Union Wage adjustments?
I'm thinking I'm going to take a lifeline on that, but before I do, I just want to make sure I understand the nature of the question. Are we looking at the change in what the vacation, the amount of vacation that's provided, or are we looking at the financial implications of this particular vacation plan?
For time, you can answer directly.
So in other words, I understand with the COLA, that's an increase over the base. So 2%, that's an increase over 22, right? 2 3/4 increase over previous years. So I see the COLA as a change. I'm just curious to know, how does the vacation that you represent, is that a change over what's in the current contract? I'm assuming it's not 3 weeks more, but how does that compare to what they currently had?
Mr. Shemetz, would you like your lifeline?
Yes, I would.
Who would you like?
I was going to call my mother. No.
Gotta love your mother. Would you like the comptroller? To the chief of police, could you please come join us? Dun, dun, dun. While he makes his way, the personnel board is made up of 7 members. And just so everyone knows, they're not allowed actually to hold any other town office.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I was halfway down the aisle when you were calling Stacy, so I didn't know if you were going to have me up here or not. So to answer your question through the moderator, so right now, people that are not in the union currently get that 5 years at 3 weeks, 10 years at 4 weeks, and 15 at 5 weeks. Right now, the way that the Superior's contract is set up is at 15 years, they get an extra day until year 20 to get their 5th week. So that's the way it was originally set up. We're trying to put it on pace with what's currently in the personnel policy handbook for non-union individuals.
Thank you very much for that answer. Any other questions or comments from town meeting members? Town meeting members who are outside the auditorium, will you please come join us? We are going to do voice votes on motion 1 through 10. A majority vote is required. We're going to roll right through it. As I read them, our IT is also going to post them. Article 29, motion number 1. There we go. It is moved and seconded that the town's compensation plan be amended effective June 1st, 2022, as recommended by the town manager and the personnel board as set forth in Appendix A, proposed classification of positions on Schedule 6, Recreation Compensation Schedule R grades, fiscal year 22, June 1st, 2022. All those in favor? All those opposed? The ayes have it. Motion passes. It is moved and seconded that the town's compensation plan be amended effective July 1st, 2022, as recommended by the town manager and the personnel board as set forth in Appendix B, proposed classification of positions in Schedule 3, PT compensation schedule fiscal year 23, Schedule 4, management schedule fiscal year 23, effective July 1st, 2022. All those in favor? All those opposed? The ayes have it. Motion passes. Motion number 3, it is moved and seconded that the town appropriate the sum of $27,800 to the following municipal fiscal year 23 personnel services budget as listed below to fund wage increases effective July 1st, 2022 as a result of the creation and reclassification of positions on Schedule 3, PT compensation schedule and Schedule 4, management schedule. $8,300 shall be raised on the tax levy and $19,500 shall be transferred from the fiscal year 23 archival center number 6940 expense budget. All those in favor? All those opposed? The ayes have it. Motion passes. Motion number 4, it is moved and seconded that the town compensation plan be amended effective July 1st, 2022, as recommended by the town manager and the personnel board as set forth in Appendix B, proposed classification of positions on Schedule 5, miscellaneous positions, compensation schedule, fiscal year 23, effective July 1st, 2022. All those in favor? All those opposed? The ayes have it. Motion passes. Motion number 5. It is moved and seconded that the town raise and appropriate the sum of $3,006 to the fiscal year 23 town manager's department number 1210 personnel services budget to fund wage increases effective July 1st, 2022 as a result of an increase to the fair housing director's stipend on Schedule 5 miscellaneous positions compensation schedule. All those in favor? All those opposed? The ayes have it. Motion passes. Motion number 6 is moved and seconded that the town's Compensation schedule will be amended effective July 1st, 2022, as recommended by the Town Manager and the Personnel Board, as set forth in Appendix C, Fiscal Year 23, Non-Union Municipal Compensation Schedules proposed July 1st, 2022 on Schedule 2, CS Compensation Schedule, Fiscal Year 23, Schedule 3, PT Compensation Schedule, Fiscal Year 23, Schedule 4, Management Schedule, Fiscal Year 23, Schedule 5, Miscellaneous Positions Compensation Schedule, and Schedule 6, Recreation Compensation Schedule are grades. All those in favor? All those opposed? The ayes have it. Motion passes. Motion number 7, it is moved and seconded that the town appropriate the sum of $242,645 to various fiscal year 23 municipal personnel service budgets as listed below to fund wage increases for non-union municipal employees effective July 1st, 2022. $199,765 shall be raised on the tax levy. $9,275 shall be transferred from water and sewer retained earnings, and $33,605 shall be transferred from recreation retained earnings. Remove raise, and because we are using more than just the general fund revenue to fund these. All those in favor? All those opposed? The ayes have it. Motion number 8, moved and seconded that Schedule 9 of the town's compensation plan be amended, revised, and modified in accordance with the recommendation of the Personnel Board as set forth in Appendix D. Police Superior Officers Union Wage Adjustments for fiscal year 23, fiscal year 24, and fiscal year 25, and pursuant to a Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, reached between the Select Board and the Winchester Police Superiors Officers Association, MCOP, Local 256, dated April 5th, 2022. All those in favor? All those opposed? The ayes have it. Motion passes. Motion number 9 is moved and seconded that the town raise and appropriate the sum of $43,503 to the fiscal year 23 Police Department number 2100 Personnel Services budget to fund increases in wages for employees of the Winchester Police Superiors Association. All those in favor? All those opposed? The ayes have it. Motion passes. Motion number 10 is moved and seconded that the town raise and appropriate the sum of $360,426 for the fiscal year 23 unallocated wage account to provide for the revision and adjustments in salaries and wages and other benefits for unsettled collective bargaining agreements for municipal union employees of the town for fiscal year 23, and some to be allocated pursuant to the subsequent town meeting votes. All those in favor? All those opposed? The ayes have it. Motion passes. To the Comptroller, are we ready to proceed with Article 34?
Matt Griffin post Article 34, and we'll just read it as it
Yep.
is.
So Article 34 is going to be placed on the screen before you. I will also read it. It is moved and seconded that the town will vote to authorize and direct the Board of Assessors to take $690,626 from free cash to reduce the tax levy for fiscal year 2023. Again, that is $690,626. On behalf of the proponent is the town manager. Do we have a recommendation? Is the town manager present? Did someone want to speak? We're all set? Select Board, did you want to give your recommendation? Mr. Mucci, on behalf of the Select Board.
Select Board voted unanimously favorable action.
Thank you. FinCom, can you give your recommendation on Article 34, please? Thank you. So town meeting members, this is Article 34. It's on page 48. And the language for that motion is on the screen behind me. This is to authorize assessors to reduce the tax levy. This is an important motion for us. And so I assume that everyone from the auditorium is with us still. It requires a... Oh, absolutely. Any other town meeting members have questions, please make your way to the mic.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Through you to Select Board and Finance Committee. What is the thinking behind this? We know we need free cash. What is the thinking behind this?
Select Board members, can you please provide an overview of what this article does and the thinking of this?
Essentially because for FY23, we are spending more money than what Proposition 2.5 allows us, right? There's a limit on the tax levy. This is the additional free cash that we have to use to fund what we passed on the yellow sheet. So that allocates more than the 2.5% that is allowed by the yellow sheet. This is the free cash that is in excess of what we allocated.
Did you want to add a comment to that as well?
I did, Madam just to remind you, this type of behavior is what Moody's frowns upon. So we shouldn't do this in the future. We didn't cut the budget enough this year. We hope in future years we can aim for more fiscal responsibility. Thank you.
Any other town meeting members with questions or comments? Seeing no one rise, we are voting to authorize the Board of Assessors to reduce the tax levy by the amount on your screen in red before. All those in favor? All those opposed? The ayes have it. The motion passes. Article 35, we don't have any motions before us, so we are done with the business. As a reminder, this ends the conclusion of the spring 2022 town meeting, but we will return for the special town meeting on June 6th at 7 p.m. at this location following Town Day. Don't forget Town Day is that weekend prior. So enjoy Town Day and all.
I'm sorry, Madam Moderator, I need a motion.
I will get there. I will get there. So everyone enjoy your Town Day. Can I get a motion to adjourn and dissolve? And a second? Thank you. What?
Good evening, everybody. I'm Alan Iden, and you have just seen Winchester Spring regular town meeting wrap up. Final session, session 4 here on Monday night, May 9th. So the big article tonight was, well, let's cover the first article. The first article was Article 18, which was to allocate $200,000 for a multi-purpose sports court at Mystic School, basically rebuilding the asphalt basketball court at Mystic School into a multi-purpose court. We heard that the court was not updated in 25 years. No lights or sound are included in this proposal. We heard that COVID decimated the funds to the Recreation Department when they had to pretty much stop all their programs, and the town had to subsidize it to the tune of $300,000 this year. The director of the Recreation Department is focused on making that department self-sustaining. Objectives to this were centered on not going through capital planning instead of just coming right back to the select board. But the select board said they wanted to propose it this way because the Recreation Department is an enterprise fund, which basically means they fund themselves by the fees that they take in. So anyway, that sports court at Mystic School was passed on a vote of 133 to 18. And then came the big article of the night, which was Article 26, a proposal for almost $6 million, $5,980,000 to be borrowed to rebuild the Carriage House up on the property adjacent to the Ambrose School and the Sanborn House to permanently house the town's school administration. We heard that Parkhurst will be renovated for the Lynch students to move to while Lynch is being rebuilt. That is going to be dealt with in Article 27 and would be available for rental once it's vacated after they move back into the renovated Lynch school. And according to Chris Nixon from the school committee and the EFPBC, Educational Facilities Building and Planning Committee, that would actually be an income producer for the town. It would also save the cost of moving the central office once again, which has been in several different places, such as Mystic School, Lynch School, and currently is occupying space at the Parkhurst School. We heard that building was built in 1908. There was an evaluation of adding it to the Lynch rebuild and housing the administration there, but the costs and timing favored the Carriage House. And that had been made part of the master plan that was created in 2017, was moving the administration to this renovated Carriage House. The architect made a presentation about the advantage of moving all the Lynch students off-site. Again, talking about the Lynch School reconstruction, said that there were big advantages and cost advantages and construction advantages to moving all the Lynch students out of Lynch during the construction because there was the possibility of moving only some of them. He showed site and floor plans of the Carriage House, the proposed Carriage House reconstruction. We heard that Parkhurst School would still need about 8 modular classrooms to accommodate all of the Lynch class, but we were told if the Carriage House renovation was not approved, 16 modulars would be needed there to accommodate, to keep the school administration on the property. We heard from the Select Board. The Select Board was opposed to this. They said there was no funding for the debt service in the budget, and they were very concerned that it might hurt the town's bond rating. They suggested, the chair suggested some alternatives, renting from Cummings properties in adjacent towns, modular classrooms, or moving the administration temporarily to Town Hall. The school committee voted 3-2 in favor, and the planning board was in favor, but they commented they were nothing. There was nothing to do with the finances of the project, just with the preserving a historic building. The Finance Committee was unanimously opposed to the project. They said Lynch project is the priority. They were concerned about the construction timetable and also the construction proximity to Ambrose School, an active elementary school, and also the town's bond rating. They presented alternatives to using modulars at Parkhurst. Again, they were unanimously against this article. We heard from several town meeting members that were opposed to it, although one town meeting member commented the town's bond rating has never changed despite warnings year after year. And also that moving the administration would cost $600,000 for this temporary, moving them out of Lynch to another, out of Parkhurst to another place would cost $600,000. Chris Nixon, again, jointly presenting from EFPBC and the school committee, said that this does not qualify for state funding. The question was moved after many people felt that enough debate had happened, but that moving the question failed. It was 94-60 and you require 103, a 2/3 majority. So we went back to discussion on this article. A town meeting member was concerned that the delay might affect the Morocco rebuild if this was not passed. Ultimately, this article failed by a vote of 25 to 134. So the Carriage House remains in limbo. Article 27 was much more modest. That was $169,750 for design work, design and engineering work for the Parkhurst School to accommodate Lynch students. So basically a study to find out what was going to be needed, what will be needed at the Parkhurst School to accommodate all of the students from the Lynch school. There will be the funding for it. The study will be done over the summer, and funding for this will be presented to fall town meeting. That was passed by 157-2. Obviously, town meeting is much more accommodating to pass $169,000 than $6 million. Article 28 was $75,000 for engineering and traffic improvements at Lynch. We saw some of the traffic jams that are there that affect the school, that affect the side streets around Lynch. That's $75,000 to study improvements to that area, probably in conjunction with the reconstruction and probably actually maybe before the reconstruction of the school begins. That passed. Article 29 was the annual presentation from the Personnel Board. Some of the things included in that were Recreation Department, payroll reorganizations, an archivist position, Fair Housing Director stipend increase, the superior officers, police officers contract, and an allocation for unsettled contracts that often contain retroactive pay increases, so it would be their estimate of how much those would cost. All of those motions were passed. Article 34, wrapping up, $690,000 to move from free cash to reduce the tax levy, and that is basically that the tax levy was over Proposition 2.5 allowed, and the $690 would bring that back down to the correct Prop 2.5 level. No committee, Article 35, the final article of the town meeting and of this night was to receive committee reports, and there were none to receive. Okay, and a reminder, now that we've wrapped up spring town meeting, a reminder there is a special town meeting on June 6th to evaluate proposals for the Waterfield Lot project. So that is coming up on June 6th. And we have two upcoming reminders. We want to remind you that NCA Fair is back. That is Friday, May 20th and Saturday, May 21st. The NCA Fair, a great fundraising project and a over 100-year tradition in the town of Winchester. So NCA Fair is back Friday the 20th and Saturday the 21st. And another tradition is back, Town Day, on the first weekend of June. That is Friday, June 3rd for the evening block party, and Saturday, June 4th for the street fair and all the associated festivities, food, and fireworks. So that's Friday, June 3rd and Saturday, June 4th upcoming. So a lot of activity over the next month or so in Winchester before we get a little bit sleepy for the summer. And one final reminder, you are watching WinCam, Winchester's viewer-supported television. We thank you for that. To learn more and how you can support our mission, we encourage you to go to www.wincam.org. And that wraps up our spring town meeting coverage here at Winchester High School. We will be back on June 6th covering the special town meeting. So for all of us and the WinCam staff here and for myself, we want to thank you for joining us, and we encourage you to keep tuned to WinCam. Thanks and good night.